While working at a hardware store in Endicott, New York, 32-year-old divorcee Holly Patterson had seen her share of strapping men walk through the doors. But in January of 1999, one of those studs came to stay.
I was supervising head cashier, and I noticed a guy just started working. He was handsome and kind of caught my eye.
His name was Brian Angel. And from what Holly could tell, the 29-year-old more than lived up to his name.
He just seemed friendly and used to come in with his daughters a lot. And I just thought that was sweet. And all the girls thought, what a great guy.
But like most perfect men, Brian was perfectly taken.
He was married and she was beautiful. And he treated her great. I mean, he just seemed like the all-around good guy. Perfect husband, great dad.
And after a difficult divorce, Holly, too, was focused on being a great parent to her own daughters, 8-year-old Alexis and 2-year-old Peyton.
After my ex and I separated, I just took the time to be myself. I really just wanted to be alone, to raise my kids.
Still, every time Holly saw Brian with his family, she couldn't help but hope that her own Mr. Perfect might still be out there. Then one day, a glimmer of hope.
I was out in the break room and Brian had come out and he said, I'm in the middle of a horrible separation. I was really taken back because I thought they had the perfect life.
Over the next 6 months, the co-workers became friends as Brian filled Holly in on his far from perfect marriage.
Brian told me that his wife would just instigate fights with him and tear him down. So I said, well, what are you going to do? You know, you got those kids and everything. I know it's not easy. I felt horrible for him, and I kind of started getting a soft spot for him.
And in the fall of 2000, after Brian finalized his divorce, Holly felt comfortable taking the relationship to the next level. That's when Mr. Nice Guy turned into Mr. Wonderful.
He seemed like Prince Charming. He opened the car door for me. He would buy me flowers for no special reason. He'd take me to dinner. I finally felt like a princess.
Best of all, Brian was terrific with Holly's children.
He had his 4 daughters come over to introduce to my daughters, and all 6 of them were playing, and they were all getting along well.
I thought he was really cool. He was fun to be around. He was like a big kid, and I looked at him more like a friend.
In June of 2001, after crashing on friends' couches for the past 6 months, Brian hinted at moving in with Holly and her daughters.
I thought, if he just stays on the couch and he looks for a place to stay, I can tolerate it for a week or 2. After Brian had moved in, everything seemed to be going great. He was there for the girls. It just seemed like a perfect setup.
But what seemed like perfection would become unspeakably flawed.
He's a person that stretches boundaries. If you stretch them too fast, they snap.
I can't imagine what went through his mind to think that he'd ever get away with it.
And soon, Holly would see the devil lurking behind Brian's angel eyes.
I couldn't believe that my whole world came to an end. It just crashed down on me.
In the summer of 2001, Holly Patterson and her boyfriend Brian Angel were the picture of blended family perfection.
Brian usually would get his 4 girls once or twice during the week and then every other weekend. Of course, my daughters looked forward to spending time with his girls.
He would let us do whatever we wanted. Brian was like my buddy.
We had the perfect life. We were like the Brady Bunch, just all girls.
But circumstance was about to test their new family bonds.
Brian lost his job at the hardware store. He kind of butted heads with one of the managers out there. It did hit the household income a little bit. So we kind of had to make cutbacks, and it became a little bit of a struggle.
Brian reassured Holly that he'd land another job quickly. But in the meantime, he'd make himself useful by babysitting the girls after school.
It was comforting knowing that Brian was home with the girls while I was at work. I knew he was taking good care of them, making dinner, and the house was clean.
He did everything for Holly's girls. Brian talked about them all the time. He absolutely adored the two.
In fact, there was little Brian wouldn't do for the benefit of the girls.
On Alexis's 9th birthday party, she had about 8 girls spend the night. And then later that night, after we went to bed, something woke me up. And I looked, and Brian wasn't in bed with me. So I went to go look for him. And when I went to the girls' room, I noticed that Brian was in there. And I said, "Brian, what are you doing?" And he got up real quietly and, "Shh, one of the girls were choking. I took her a glass of water. Go back to bed." And I said, "Okay." I'm glad he heard her.
For months, the Patterson Angel clan coasted along, with Holly bringing home the bacon and Brian holding down the fort. But in the winter of 2002, Holly noticed a change in her older daughter Alexis's attitude toward Brian.
They still thought he was funny, but now he would discipline them if they were bad. I noticed Alexis was kind of pulling away, kind of giving him dirty looks and rolling her eyes once he started playing the stepfather role.
Rough patch with Alexis aside, things were looking up for the family when Brian found a great new job as a union carpenter.
We worked on the same job sites, and it was always great to work with Brian. Brian was the one that anytime you needed help, he was there.
Everybody kind of counted on him. Whatever it needed to be, he was always helping.
Brian's kindness and generosity was unmatched, right down to the family's bedtime ritual.
Every night before bed, the girls would go to bed with a drink. Brian would get their drinks all ready to go. He'd have Peyton's sippy cup ready with juice or Alexis's glass of water ready to go. He often made my tea to go to bed, and I thought that was sweet.
But sweet dreams soon became a thing of the past when Peyton started having nightmares.
Peyton would start yelling for me, "Mom, come here, Mom," and crying. I'd go up and I'd say, "What's the matter, honey? I had a bad dream," and I would soothe her back to sleep. And Brian would get really mad at me for going in and comforting her. And he'd say, "She needs to grow up. She can sleep through the night." And she'd ask me to lay down with her. And I wanted to because I wanted to comfort her, but I knew that if I started that ritual, and I knew I'd do it every night.
Meanwhile, Holly was developing some strange sleeping problems herself.
Brian had started remodeling a couple of the rooms, and I didn't know if it was allergies or something from dust kicking around, but sometimes it was really hard to wake up in the morning, and I would get to work and say, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't feel like I can function. I'm just so tired."
But dust and drowsiness seemed a small price to pay for Brian's hard work on improving her family's home.
Brian was passionate about what he did, so he worked really hard doing stuff around the house. He finished the kitchen for me. He treated me and the girls like gold.
But Brian's motives would prove to be anything but selfless.
Nobody really knows what happens in the middle of the night when he's out lurking in the dark.
And soon Holly would discover just how heartless her Mr. Wonderful could be.
She would not stay at the house. She feared him.
I just felt like I was in the middle of a nightmare. Everything was spinning. Like, what is going on?
Despite a few sleep issues, in the summer of 2005, Holly Patterson and her boyfriend Brian Angel were living a storybook life. But one night, Holly awoke to a disorienting sight.
I woke up and Brian was standing right at the end of my bed, underneath the opening to the attic. I said, "What are you doing?" And he kind of looked at me funny, like I scared him. And he said, "Killing a bug." And I really didn't think anything of it. I was half asleep, so I kind of just let it go.
And shortly after Brian started his new carpentry job, Holly noticed he seemed to have a short fuse.
Most of the time, Brian was great to be around, but once he would get angry about one little thing, it was an explosion of anger and him throwing things and screaming.
Brian was changing in ways Holly never expected. He even began drinking frequently.
I didn't know what was going on. It seemed to be a daily thing, causing a strain on our relationship because he was coming home at 7 or 8 at night, drunk, and he would just be cocky and ornery, and His Mr. Perfect kind of started to fade.
After 5 years together, it seemed this Brady bunch was losing its shiny, happy veneer. Especially when Holly noticed Alexis, now 13, was starting to become an introverted teenager.
Alexis was really kind of withdrawn. She secluded herself to her room a lot.
But Holly was taken aback when Brian said Alexis had started showering in the dark.
And I said, well, I didn't even know she turned the light off.
You can see from down the stairs that the lights are off.
And I said, she can take a shower in the dark if she wants to. She was very private, kept to herself. I noticed Nikki, her best friend that used to be here on a daily basis, wasn't coming over anymore. And I asked her, where's Nikki? And she kind of passed it off to being in the middle school and them kind of drifting apart.
So Holly was grateful when Brian suggested some BFF bonding time for the girls in the country.
I had to stay back here and work, so Brian offered to take the girls up to Seneca Lake to go jet skiing and, just have a good weekend together.
But when they returned, Alexis let her mother in on a secret.
She said, Brian let Nikki get drunk. I said, she's 13. And she said, yeah, and he drank with her. So I said, really? Are you kidding me? I was shocked. So I went to Brian right away.
Brian explained he'd found Nikki sneaking around with a bottle of alcohol she'd found.
He said, I didn't let her drink. So I was really bothered by it.
Combined with the escalation of his own drinking and aggressive outbursts, Holly began to reconsider their relationship.
And I gave him the ultimatum. I said, you can't be the man that you were when I first met you. I said, I don't want to be with you.
I promise, I'm done.
And he said, I promise, I'll change, I promise.
To Holly's relief, Brian took her ultimatum seriously, and the next 3 years flew blissfully by. And in May of 2008, in front of a crowd of hundreds at a local racetrack, Brian asked Holly to become his Mrs. Angel.
So, Holly? Oh my God. Will you be my wife?
And I said yes. And everybody was cheering. My daughters were so excited for me. They were very happy. They hugged me. They hugged Brian.
After 8 years together, Holly and Brian finally tied the knot with all 6 of their daughters standing by their sides.
The whole family was at the wedding, so it was nice to just have everyone together.
And the newlyweds couldn't have been happier when Holly discovered she was pregnant 8 months later, this time with a boy. When their son Dallas was born in December 2010, Holly felt blessed to be living her dream.
This time being pregnant just meant the world to me, with Brian being there and being so loving, and I just knew that this just is perfect.
But that summer, Holly's perfect life would take a devastating turn. While Peyton stayed home with Brian, Holly took Alexis to get settled in for her first year at college.
I spent the day with Alexis, at her school, and I noticed that Peyton had texted me. And I looked at it and it said, Mom, you need to call me. This is an emergency.
Holly's heart leapt into her throat and she immediately called Peyton.
And the way she answered the phone was odd to me because she kind of was in a whisper. And I said, what is going on? What are you doing?
What Peyton said next would turn Holly's future dreams into an utter nightmare.
If she could have killed him, she would have right there.
I said, you need to get out of the house. You need to leave that house right now.
If you have a story for Who the Bleep and would like to appear on the series, go to investigation.discovery.com. On the night of March 25th, 2011, while away with her daughter Alexis, Holly Angel received an emergency call from her youngest daughter, Peyton.
She goes, I can't talk. I'll call you back. I said, don't do this to me. I said, text me or something. So I hung up with her, frantic. Is she hiding from somebody? Is something happening to her? Do I call 911? What do I do? What if she doesn't text me?
After several heart-pounding minutes, Peyton's text finally came through, and what she had to say nearly dropped Holly to her knees.
She said, Mom, Brian's walking around the house naked. telling me to get in the shower and saying he is gonna get sexual favors. I said, oh my God, Peyton. And I'm panicking. I said, you need to get out of the house. You need to leave that house right now. And I said, start walking like you're walking to your dad's house. I'll get a hold of Grandma and tell her to come pick you up.
I was really scared because if Brian looked out his window, he could see me walking.
Within minutes, Peyton was safe in her grandmother's care, and Holly began to process what her youngest daughter had said.
I said to Alexis, has he ever said or done anything like this to you? And she put her hands over her eyes and she just started crying. And I just said, what is going on? And she said, he's doing it to Peyton too?
Holly was stunned to learn that Brian had been preying on Alexis and her sister for 10 years. Her heart crumbled as Alexis confessed that Brian used to watch her shower from a vent in the attic.
I knew that he was up there. So I decided after that I would just shower in the dark. It really scared me.
And I thought, well, what was he doing when I woke up that day? Was he jumping up into that attic? So all these memories are coming back of things that just seem strange, out of place.
But nothing could have prepared Holly for what Alexis would say next.
Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night and my pants were down. When I woke up in the morning, I would see Brian in my room, and he would always get real jumpy if I woke up while he was in there. And it just, scared me.
I said, honey, I'm so sorry.
Holly's mind raced as she thought back through Brian's behavior over the years.
Things I couldn't put my finger on, and now they made perfect sense. When Peyton would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming, with him helping us get ready for bed with the drinks, I think he very well could have been putting sleeping pills in our waters at night. I was devastated. Everything I thought I knew of him, the dream that I thought I lived in, my whole world came to an end. It just crashed down on me.
Holly immediately contacted the girl's father, who alerted the police. And on March 27, 2011, Brian Angel was arrested for sexual abuse in the first and second degree.
We all, just cried. I thought I had a wonderful marriage, and it never was. And my husband, that I thought was the man of my dreams, just got arrested for sexually assaulting my two girls.
And Holly's daughters were not the only victims. While Brian had not preyed on his biological children, after his arrest, several neighborhood girls came forward with their own tales of abuse while on playdates at the Angel home.
He was always lurking, always sneaking, and so all the kids recall pants off, underwear off, but they don't know how it happened in the middle of the night.
And that camping trip to Seneca Lake? Brian had actually supplied Alexis's friend Nikki with the alcohol she supposedly found.
He wanted to be the fun dad, the fun father, we're going to give him alcohol and stuff like that. But this is part of the grooming process to get him to the next level where he can do things for his own sexual gratification.
On February 15, 2012, Brian Angel pled guilty to first and second degree sexual abuse for molesting Alexis and Peyton. But rather than endure a painful trial, the additional victims agreed to a plea deal.
The kids in this grand jury room were crying, and you feel terrible for them. It's basically a plea deal to avoid the trial, so that no other charges would be brought against them, and avoid a lot more hurt and then let the healing begin.
Brian Angel was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Today, Holly struggles to believe that Brian Angel, her charming, handsome husband, was really a devil in disguise.
I just felt tricked. I felt betrayed by everything. Nothing was real. Nothing. Not even him, He was able to fake this wonderful man, and the real him was that monster.
And even though the experience has been difficult, Holly and her girls are determined to get through this together.
My mom and I have always been really close. I always felt like I could talk to her about anything. Now I really can talk to her about anything, and I just feel free.
I'm healing from it now. So I feel a lot better about it. I'm so glad that he's gone and we don't have to deal with that anymore.
You take it day by day. Every day's better. We're healing from it. We're moving forward together.
Single mom Anna Torres adored her 3-year-old daughter, Elizabeth.
I was 16 when I got pregnant with Elizabeth. My heart was filled with joy. I was just elated to have my first child, a little girl.
But Anna felt trapped in her relationship with Lizzie's father.
It was a bad relationship. I wanted better. I wanted to move on.
So in the summer of 1997, Anna found the courage to leave. She moved from Anaheim to Orange, California, and got a job working as a dispatcher for a local tow truck company.
I felt a sense of accomplishment. I was able to move on with my life.
Anna was focused on building a good life for Lizzie. Romance was the last thing on her mind. But that fall, Anna realized a coworker was paying close attention to her.
I would work the night shift. He would come in because he was a tow truck driver. He would just chat. I wasn't looking for anybody at that time, but he was pretty persistent with coming around, bringing lunch, flowers at times. Kind of made me think, he seems like a really nice guy.
The man's name was Ed Montano, and over the next few months, Anna was surprised by how comfortable she felt opening up to him. And even more surprised when her stories of past relationship dramas and being a single mom didn't send Ed running for the hills.
I wouldn't say there was a chemistry attraction there, but he didn't seem like he would hurt a fly. He genuinely seemed like he cared, like he wanted to comfort me.
Anna and Ed's friendship quickly blossomed into romance. And after 6 months of dating, Anna was excited to meet Ed's adoptive parents and learn more about his family. But the visit would leave Anna with more questions than answers.
Ed and his father walked away to have a conversation, and his mother started to make small talk, and I started to talk about my daughter. And she did not know that I had a child. And she said, "You have a child?" And I said, "Yes. Didn't Ed tell you?" And she said, "No." And so I was disappointed. Didn't understand. He just seemed to be so accepting of Lizzie and loving.
Anna was heartbroken by Ed's glaring omission, and she wondered why would adoptive parents have such strong feelings about stepkids.
Ed told me that his parents were very old-fashioned and wanted to see him get married, then have a child, because Ed had been married previously with 2 stepchildren. I felt that they looked at it as, oh boy, here we go again. Being married with stepkids, it's not going to work out.
Ed assured Anna that his mother's views were not his own. And 6 months later, when Anna discovered she was pregnant and Ed suggested they get married, any doubts Anna felt about Ed's commitment disappeared.
I just wanted to say, hey, I did the right thing, and I've moved on, and he's so good. And, you know, he's really soft, and he's gentle, and he's quiet.
She thought Ed was the nice guy, and he was going to take care of her, and they were going to raise his family together.
So in January of 1998, Anna and Ed tied the knot in a no-frills ceremony at City Hall.
Being 4 months pregnant, I didn't want to have a big wedding. I was excited about the fresh start. I desired to be, married in a committed relationship with somebody who said that he loved me. And I was happy. I was happy.
And when Anna gave birth to a son, she counted her blessings.
I felt it was only right to name him after his father. And when he held him in his hands, he cried. I was happy to see him, to be happy.
But Ed's gentle facade was hiding too many sinister secrets to count.
Behind closed doors, he was a monster.
Secrets that would tear Anna's small family to shreds.
I told him that this confession was going to be under confidentiality, but confidentiality has its limitations.
He was a different man than what I had known.
The clean-cut guy who volunteers in the community, nobody suspects that person.
In the summer of 1998, newlyweds Anna Torres and Ed Montano had just welcomed a baby boy into their blended family.
It was a fresh start for all of us. We became a family of 4.
Anna and Ed and Elizabeth and little Eddie, they just seem to be a beautiful family.
And when Ed announced he was going to pursue his dream of becoming an EMT, Anna couldn't have been more supportive.
Ed said that he wanted to become an EMT because he wanted to be home there more for the kids.
He took pride in being part of a team. I think that was important for Ed to look good in his community.
But Ed worked the night shift and Anna worked days, so theirs was a tough schedule to keep.
Ed and I were like 2 ships passing in the night. He said he preferred the night shift because there was more activity, there was more action, and he seemed to flourish in that.
And as the next several years passed, Anna also realized that she and Ed had very different ideas when it came to parenting their children.
When I would get home from work and make dinner, I noticed that both of their appetites started to change. So I would ask them, and they said, "Oh, well, Dad took us to eat." And he would say, "Well, you know, they're kids. They want some fast food."
And Ed wasn't just spoiling the kids' appetites.
When I would come home, there would be these new gadgets, the cell phone, a karaoke machine, a video game. It was always something that we couldn't afford, but yet he felt a necessity to buy these for the kids. He was wanting to spoil them, which I could understand, but what I couldn't understand was he wasn't teaching them any values. He wasn't saying, okay, well, you know, you have to earn this by doing this.
Anna was irritated by Ed's lazy parenting, but she knew the kids were in safe hands, so she pushed her feelings aside. Until one day, when Anna received a call from Lizzie's school, asking why she had been absent that day.
It was about when Lizzie was in 5th grade or so. I thought something terrible had happened. I started to really panic. I just left work and took off like a bat out of hell.
When Anna got home, Lizzie was nowhere to be seen, and Ed was fast asleep.
I just shook him as hard as I could and said, "Where's Elizabeth? Where's Elizabeth? The school called, she's not there. Where is she?" And he just turned around and he said, "Oh, she's at her friend's house across the street playing." I said, "She didn't show up to school today." And he said, "I know, she was sick." And I remember turning around, looking at him saying, "If she's sick, then why did you allow her to go play at her friend's house? That doesn't make any sense." And so I was angry. If she was genuinely sick, then why didn't he call me?
Ed apologized and agreed to call Anna if there was ever an issue with the kids. Over the next several years, life went pleasantly by for Anna and her family. But as Lizzie approached her teen years, Anna noticed a troubling change in her daughter.
Lizzie did seem to be withdrawn at certain periods in her life. And I always attributed that to her age and growing and developing into a young woman.
Anna also noticed signs of depression in her husband.
Ed would flip-flop from being a passive and loving and wanting to help to a person that kind of switched, changed, became depressed, and then his behavior became more and more withdrawn. They noticed him spending more time in the bedroom, not communicating.
Anna wondered what was happening to her family. And in the spring of 2007, when they moved to a small town in Nevada, she hoped the change of scenery would do them good. But before long, Anna would learn that her family's mood swings were the least of her worries.
He came across as a great guy. People didn't realize what was really underneath.
Nobody suspected him. He was an EMT, so people in the community trusted him.
I immediately got these butterflies in my stomach thinking, oh my gosh, what is wrong?
By the winter of 2008, Anna Torres and Ed Montano had been married for nearly 10 years. but they had become more focused on their children than on their own relationship.
I was occupied with working and making dinner, taking the kids to their functions at school. Ed didn't have a desire to participate in any functions unless it was with our kids.
Anna didn't really mind. After all, Ed was a loving father, but his tendency to be a pushover as a parent was becoming increasingly frustrating to her.
Ed would come to Lizzie's defense and if I disciplined her. So if I told her that she was grounded for one day and the next day I'd come home from work and where's Lizzie? Oh, well, she's, at so-and-so's house or doing something.
Anna was irritated at the parental sabotage and annoyed that she always had to play the role of strict parent as well as deal with the repercussions.
Lizzie's grades started to slip, and I let Lizzie know that it was really important to keep her grades up. And if she could not do that, she was going to have to miss a couple of dancing lessons until we could get her back on schedule. I remember her just reacting like it was the end of the world for her. Just crying and saying, no, I love going to dance. I love singing, Mom. I'll keep my grades up.
Anna thought Lizzie was struggling with typical teen angst, but on February 4th, 2008, Anna received a call that would prove her 14-year-old daughter was dealing with something far more serious.
I was at work and I got a phone call, and it was the school nurse. And I said, is Lizzie okay? And she said, you need to come down to the school. I need to talk to you. And I immediately got these butterflies in my stomach thinking, oh my gosh, what is wrong? So when I got down to the school, I had gone in the nurse's office. Lizzie looked at the nurse and she started to cry. And the nurse told her, it's okay. You can tell your mom. And she told me, Dad's been touching me and he's been doing it for a long time. And I just hugged her and I told her I would stand by her, and I believe her and I would support her. At that moment, that's all I could do.
The revelations were gut-wrenching. Anna learned that Ed Montano had been molesting Lizzie since she was 5 years old. After taking Elizabeth to the police station to file a report, Anna turned her focus to confronting her husband.
My mother had taken Lizzie and my son to her home so I could confront Ed. When I got home, he sat down at the table and I looked right at him and I said, Lizzie said that you have been sexually abusing her. Immediately, he put his head down, and he said it's not true, but he wouldn't look at me. Get out! I was standing by the stove, and I remember that block of knives being there, and I just wanted to pick it up and just stab him with it. I was so angry.
Anna immediately kicked Ed out of the house.
She had a hard time focusing in reality. One day, she's married, and then the next day, everything that she thought to be true was just falling apart.
I didn't know if it was both of my children that he had abused. I spoke with my son and asked him if he also had been abused, and he had not. I started to analyze everything, every gift he had bought, everything that he had done. What did I miss? What didn't I see? It just started to all kind of fit together and make sense.
Ed hadn't been spoiling the kids or shirking his parental responsibility. He had been bribing them to keep them quiet.
He would buy him a soda or chips or something like that. And then he would take Elizabeth into the bedroom and shut the door so that Eddie wouldn't see it. He'd put a movie on for Eddie so that he'd sit down and watch it so that they were alone in the bedroom without any adult supervision, without any other witnesses around.
And Anna began to wonder if her in-laws' objection to Ed marrying a single mother was caused by something far worse than their old-fashioned values. Did they know about Ed's secret?
My head was in a cloud. I cried. I tried to keep it together for my kids. But when you're told that a man that you've been married to for 10 years is a monster, there was no way to process that information.
But as Anna and her family tried to heal, they would soon learn that Ed was more than a child molester.
He was living that lie for so many years.
He was able to manipulate all these people.
His dark secrets went much, much deeper.
The person that I was married to didn't exist.
If you have a story for Who the Bleep and would like to appear on the series, go to investigationdiscovery.com. In February of 2008, Anna Torres was struggling to comprehend that her husband had been molesting her 14-year-old daughter Lizzie for 9 years.
It's really hard to accept that somebody that you love and you trust and you've been married to for 10 years would harm your children.
But Lizzie's confession was just the first step on a painful path to justice.
Ed told her, if you tell, then the family's going to fall apart. Your mom's going to be upset. I'm going to go to jail. And so the things that Ed had told her would happen started to happen.
Because of Ed's powerful manipulation, Lizzie felt responsible for breaking up the family and was afraid to take any further action against Ed.
Elizabeth had to go to therapy to mentally get to a place where she could talk about it.
So for the next 18 months, Lizzie worked with a forensic psychologist. But that meant 18 months that Ed was out free and allowed supervised visits with his 10-year-old son.
It was torture for me and my family, thinking that he was going to be able to go free.
It was a stressful time, trying to deal with him still being out on the street. It was hard for the family.
While Lizzie struggled through therapy, Ed was doing some talking of his own.
When Ed came to me and started talking about this, I told him that confidentiality has its limitations. He admitted that he was doing this to Elizabeth.
Father Jorge ended up coming forward and telling the police about what he had been told. But without a victim to testify, this is what happened to me, then the case really can't go forward.
Worried for her daughter's safety, Anna decided to keep tabs on Ed's whereabouts and was sickened by what she discovered.
I was informed that he was dating a woman that had 3 children and had actually moved in with her and her children.
He was living in this neighborhood where there's parks on 2 different sides and children crossing his house on a daily basis.
And when Elizabeth realized that what she went through could happen to someone else, she found the courage to press charges. On April 29, 2010, Ed Montano was arrested and charged with 3 counts of open and gross lewdness.
Elizabeth was incredibly brave in this whole process. Sitting in a courtroom full of strangers with the person who's been abusing you, the person who should have protected you.
She was having to go through that again, all because this man wouldn't come forward and say he was guilty.
In October of 2010, with Lizzie's testimony, Ed was convicted on all 3 counts and sentenced to 3 years in jail. Terrified that Ed would be out soon and able to abuse more victims, Anna decided to do some investigating of her own.
I started to look back and analyze everything that he would say, things that just didn't click or didn't make sense. That's when I decided to make an anonymous phone call to immigration.
And Anna's instincts were spot on.
Ed was not a citizen of the United States and had a felony arrest for a burglary. And so we didn't want him to be kicked out of the country before we could get that conviction on him. So what I discussed with immigration was that we would go forward with our charges first.
The man that I knew as Ed Montano in reality was a man named Manuel Dominguez. He was born in Mexico and he was given to this couple and brought to the United States.
Anna's son was named after a criminal and a ghost. As devastating as this information was to Anna, she was relieved to know that Ed would be deported back to Mexico upon his release from jail and not allowed back in the country.
No way in hell was I going to let him walk away and not be punished for what he did to my child.
Today, it is nearly impossible to describe the effect Ed Montano's betrayal has had on Anna Torres and Elizabeth.
I feel like he sought me out to prey on somebody who is young, naive, and came out of a bad relationship.
While Elizabeth still struggles with the emotional wounds left behind by abuse, she is determined to put it behind her.
Elizabeth is still a very caring person, and I think that says a lot about her.
And Lizzie continues to look to her mother for inspiration, who has finally found the true love she so desired.
And now I know what a healthy love relationship is. So I choose to move forward, and I choose to go on with life.
There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a city when the unthinkable happens. It is not the absence of noise, but rather an absence of comprehension, a sudden and collective inability to reconcile the world as it was with the world as it has violently become. In the realm of true crime, we often speak of the loss of innocence, a phrase so frequently used that it sometimes risks losing its profound weight. Yet, when we look back at the city of Austin, Texas, in the winter of 1991, there is simply no other way to describe the psychological fracture that occurred. This was not merely a crime. It was an event that permanently altered the atmospheric pressure of a community, leaving behind a lingering sense of vulnerability that decades of time have failed to erase. To understand the gravity of the Austin yogurt shop murders, one must first understand the devastating simplicity of the victim's circumstances. There is nothing inherently dangerous about a yogurt shop on a Friday evening. It is a setting defined by its mundane nature, a place of bright lights, casual conversations, and the transitional space between youth and adulthood where teenagers take on their first jobs and learn the rhythms of responsibility. It is meant to be safe. It is meant to be unremarkable. On the night of December 6, 1991, the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop in Austin was moving toward its closing hours. Inside were 4 young girls, their presence dictated by the most innocent of reasons. Eliza Thomas, 17 years old, and Jennifer Harbison, also 17, were the employees on duty, tasked with the routine chores of wrapping up the business day, wiping down counters, and preparing to close the doors. They were doing what countless other high schoolers across the country were doing at that exact moment. With them was Sarah Harbison, Jennifer's 15-year-old younger sister, who had simply come to the shop to wait for her sister's shift to end so they could leave together. And then there was Amy Ayers, the youngest of the group at just 13 years old. Amy had accompanied her friend to the shop with the sole intention of catching a ride home. The alignment of these 4 girls in this specific location was entirely ordinary, a product of sibling bonds, teenage friendships, and the simple logistics of needing transportation on a weekend night. There was no risk involved in their choices. They were exactly where they were supposed to be, surrounded by the safety of their community, looking forward to the rest of their weekend. What unfolded within the walls of that shop as the night deepened remains one of the most harrowing and difficult chapters in the history of American criminal investigations. The transition from a quiet Friday night closing shift to an unfathomable nightmare occurred out of sight from the passing world outside. Perpetrators breached the supposed safety of the establishment, instantly transforming a brightly lit teenage hangout into a site of absolute terror. The 4 young girls were entirely overpowered, stripped of their agency and their futures in a matter of moments. The brutality they were subjected to defies logical understanding. They were restrained, bound using their own clothing, rendering them entirely defenseless. In the confined space of the shop they had trusted, they were subjected to sexual assault, an act of supreme violation and control that stripped them of their dignity before their lives were ultimately taken. The method of their murder was chilling in its finality and its detachment. Each girl, ranging in age from 13 to 17, was shot in the head, executed in a manner that speaks to a cold, calculated intent to leave no witnesses behind. To compound the horror, and in a desperate, callous attempt to erase the evidence of their atrocities, the perpetrators intentionally set the yogurt shop on fire. The flames were meant to consume the physical reality of what had happened, to reduce the victims and the crime scene to ash, hiding the truth behind a wall of smoke and destruction. When emergency responders arrived, they believed they were responding to a structural fire, a tragic but entirely different kind of emergency. It was only after the flames were subdued that the true nature of the incident was revealed to the firefighters who entered the charred remains of the building. What they discovered among the smoke and ruin was a scene of such profound devastation that it would permanently scar the memories of those who witnessed it. The bodies of the 4 girls had been severely burned, a final indignity inflicted upon them to obscure the meticulously cruel nature of their deaths. The discoveries sent immediate shockwaves through Austin and the entire state of Texas. The sheer brutality of the crime, combined with the extreme youth and innocence of the victims, created a palpable atmosphere of dread. Parents looked at their own teenagers with newfound anxiety, realizing that if 4 girls could be systematically tortured and murdered in a commercial establishment in their own city, then nowhere was truly safe. The initial investigation launched into a frantic search for answers, desperate to identify the individuals capable of such profound evil. However, the fire had achieved at least part of its intended purpose, severely compromising the physical evidence at the scene and leaving investigators with a labyrinth of dead ends and circumstantial clues. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. The public pressure on the Austin Police Department grew exponentially, fueled by the agonizing grief of 4 families and a community demanding justice for Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza. For nearly 8 years, the case languished as a deeply painful open wound, a cold case that refused to fade from the collective consciousness. It was a period marked by exhaustive dead ends and the heavy burden of unfulfilled promises to the victims' families. Then, in 1999, the narrative appeared to shift dramatically. Under immense pressure to deliver results, authorities announced the arrest of 4 young men who would come to be known as the Austin Four: Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. At the time of the murders, these suspects had been teenagers themselves, ranging from 15 to 18 years old. The arrests seemed to offer the long-awaited resolution the city had been praying for. The cornerstone of the prosecution's case rested heavily on confessions extracted from Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, obtained only after grueling, extended interrogations that lasted for dozens of hours. The emotional toll of the proceedings was immense, as the community watched these young men face the ultimate consequences for the horrific crimes they were accused of committing. The judicial system moved forward, resulting in severe convictions. Robert Springsteen was handed down the ultimate punishment, sentenced to death, while Michael Scott was condemned to spend the rest of his natural life in prison. For a brief period, the books seemed closed. The narrative was written, the guilty were seemingly punished, and the families were expected to begin the impossible task of finding closure. But the foundation of this justice was fundamentally unstable, built upon investigative practices and legal maneuvers that would soon begin to fracture under intense scrutiny. As the new millennium progressed, the certainties of 1999 began to dissolve, revealing a legal and forensic reality far more complex and troubling than anyone had anticipated. The first major blow to the established narrative came from the highest courts. Between 2006 and 2007, the Texas Supreme Court systematically dismantled the convictions of Scott and Springsteen. The court ruled that fundamental constitutional rights had been violated during their trials, specifically the Confrontation Clause. The prosecution had utilized the confession of one defendant to incriminate the other without affording them the right to cross-examine their accuser in open court. This severe procedural error led to the overturning of the sentences, instantly throwing the resolved status of the murders back into chaos. However, the legal unraveling was only the precursor to a far more profound and chilling revelation. In 2008, the relentless advancement of scientific technology introduced a devastating new truth to the investigation. Utilizing advanced YSTR DNA analysis techniques that were unavailable in the early 90s, forensic experts re-examined the deeply compromised evidence recovered from the burned crime scene. Against all odds, they successfully isolated a distinct male DNA profile from the body of the youngest victim, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. This microscopic piece of genetic material held the power to either cement the guilt of the accused or completely rewrite the history of the case. When the anonymous male DNA profile was compared against the biological samples of the Austin Four, the results were unequivocal. The DNA did not match Robert Springsteen. It did not match Michael Scott. It did not match Maurice Pierce or Forrest Wellborn. Furthermore, When run through the National CODIS database, the profile returned no matches. The genetic signature belonged to an unknown, phantom individual who had been present at the most intimate and horrific moments of the crime, a man who had completely evaded detection for over a decade and a half. This irrefutable scientific truth shattered the prosecution's case entirely. In 2009, acknowledging the immense weight of the newly discovered exculpatory evidence, prosecutors were forced to drop all charges against Springsteen and Scott, releasing them from the profound weight of a capital murder conviction and a life sentence. The tragic trajectory of the Austin Four continued when Maurice Pierce, whose life had been irrevocably altered by the shadow of the accusations, was killed in an unrelated altercation with law enforcement in 2010. The system had spent millions of dollars, decades of man-hours, and an immeasurable amount of emotional capital, only to find itself entirely back at the beginning. Today, the murders of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison remain a hauntingly open cold case. The unknown male DNA stands as the single, silent witness to the atrocities committed in that yogurt shop. Authorities now rely on the painstaking, meticulous process of genetic genealogy, periodically checking that lonely DNA profile against vast ancestral databases, waiting for a familial connection to eventually unmask the killer. The story of the Austin yogurt shop murders is not merely a chronicle of a horrific night in 1991. It is a sprawling saga of lost youth, judicial failure, the relentless march of scientific progress, and the enduring, agonizing wait for a truth that remains stubbornly hidden in the shadows of the past. It forces us to confront the terrifying reality that sometimes the monsters who commit the most unspeakable acts simply walk out into the cold December air and disappear into the dark, leaving behind a silence that continues to echo through the decades. Austin in 1991 was a city suspended between its sleepy, countercultural past and its booming, metropolitan future. It was a place where people still largely left their doors unlocked, where the sprawling suburban neighborhoods north of the city center felt insulated from the harder edges of the world. The air in early December carried a crispness that signaled the approach of the holidays, a season typically defined by warmth, anticipation, and the gathering of families. On West Anderson Lane, a busy commercial artery characterized by strip malls and casual dining, the rhythm of a Friday night was predictable and deeply comforting. It was a landscape of illuminated neon signs, crowded parking lots, and the quiet hum of suburban commerce, a testament to the thriving, ordinary lives of the people who called this city home. In this landscape, the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop stood as a beacon of wholesome, suburban normalcy. It was not a place associated with risk or danger. It was a brightly lit haven of pastel colors and sweet treats, a fixture of the community where local teenagers congregated after football games, where families stopped for dessert after dinner, and where high school students found their first footholds in the adult world of employment. The fluorescent glow of the shop's signage spilled out into the dark parking lot, offering a false promise of perpetual safety, an illusion that would be violently shattered before the night was over. Within this brightly lit sanctuary, two 17-year-old girls were fulfilling the mundane responsibilities of their evening shift. Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were not just co-workers. They were representatives of that specific, fleeting phase of American adolescence where a part-time job signifies both burden and liberation. At 17, the world is poised on the precipice of adulthood, filled with the immediate anxieties of high school and the looming, abstract promises of the future. Eliza and Jennifer were navigating this delicate transition together, bound by the shared experience of minimum wage labor and the quiet camaraderie that develops during the slow, tedious hours of a closing shift. They were responsible, dependable young women, trusted by their employer to manage the storefront, balance the cash register, and secure the premises when the final customer had departed. Their presence behind the counter that night was a testament to their character, a demonstration of the strong work ethic and reliability that their families had carefully instilled in them. They were doing exactly what society asked of them, participating in the quiet, essential machinery of everyday life, entirely unaware that their dedication would place them directly in the path of unimaginable violence. The closing shift at a retail establishment is a ritual of transition, a slow winding down of public energy. As the clock ticks toward the 10 o'clock hour, the atmosphere of the space fundamentally changes. The bright lights begin to feel a little too stark against the pressing darkness of the front windows. The sounds of the commercial machines, the hum of the heavy refrigerators, and the scraping of chairs being stacked upon tables become amplified in the sudden absence of customer chatter. Eliza and Jennifer would have been moving through these highly familiar motions, their thoughts likely drifting toward their plans for the weekend, the homework waiting for them on their desks at home, or the intricate, all-consuming social dynamics of their high school lives. They were anchored in the present moment by the physical tasks at hand, wiping down the sticky surfaces, sanitizing the frozen yogurt dispensers, sweeping the tiled floors, but their minds were undoubtedly reaching toward the future, a bright future that was rightfully theirs to claim. The profound tragedy of their situation lies in this very ordinary anticipation. They were not engaged in risky behavior. They were not in a dangerous part of town. They were simply existing in the safe, predictable confines of their workplace, carrying out the quiet, honorable duties of their young lives. The dynamic of the evening shifted with the arrival of two younger girls, adding layers of sibling affection and deep youthful innocence to the scene. Sarah Harbison, Jennifer's 15-year-old sister, had come to the shop as the night wound down. The relationship between a 15-year-old and her 17-year-old sister is often complex, characterized by a mixture of deep admiration, mild rivalry, and profound, unspoken loyalty. For Sarah, the yogurt shop was not a workplace, but an extension of her older sister's world, a place where she could hang out, pass the time, and ultimately secure a safe, reliable ride home. At 15, Sarah was in the absolute heart of her high school experience, a time defined by shifting identities, intensifying friendships, and the gradual expansion of her social and geographic boundaries. Her presence at the shop that night underscores the devastatingly casual nature of the tragedy. She was there simply because she was a sister, because the standard logistics of a suburban Friday night dictated that she wait for Jennifer's shift to end so they could travel home together. It is a scenario played out in countless families across the country every single day, a routine reliance on sibling bonds that makes the ensuing violence all the more difficult to comprehend and accept. Accompanying Sarah was the youngest of the four victims, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. If 17 represents the precipice of adulthood, and 15 the turbulent heart of adolescence, then 13 is the lingering, fragile twilight of childhood. Amy was barely a teenager, a middle school student whose world was likely defined by weekend sleepovers, middle school crushes, and the intense, all-consuming friendships so characteristic of that specific age. Her connection to the yogurt shop was the most tenuous of all. She was simply a loyal friend tagging along, accompanying Sarah with the completely innocent expectation of getting a ride home at the end of the night. The presence of a 13-year-old girl in the crosshairs of such brutal, calculated violence is a detail that continuously shocks the conscience of anyone who examines this case. It highlights the completely indiscriminate, predatory nature of the crime. Amy was entirely vulnerable, physically and emotionally unequipped to face the darkness that was about to descend upon them. She was a child, sitting in a brightly lit suburban dessert shop, trusting implicitly in the inherent safety of her surroundings and the protective presence of her older friend and her friend's older sister. Her involvement in the events of that night was a matter of tragic, random circumstance, a fatal intersection of time and place that robbed her of her entire future before it had even truly begun to unfold. As the hour grew late, the four girls were united in that small commercial space, forming a quiet tableau of American youth and suburban tranquility. They were a vivid cross-section of adolescence, representing different stages of growth and different expectations for the world they were inheriting. Eliza and Jennifer, the responsible older girls wrapping up their work week, Sarah, the loyal sister waiting patiently for the ride home, and Amy, the young friend simply along for the journey. They were insulated from the cold darkness outside by the heavy plate glass windows and the warm, sugary air of the shop. They were entirely unaware that they were being observed, that their absolute innocence and their physical vulnerability were being calculated by individuals harboring unfathomable malice. The yogurt shop, with its bright pastel decor and its promise of sweet indulgence, was about to be transformed from a neighborhood sanctuary into a nightmare. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of the loss Austin experienced, one must deeply contemplate the massive void left by their sudden, violent absence. These were not simply 4 names on a sterile police report. They were 4 complex, developing human beings with distinct personalities, cherished dreams, and families who loved them unconditionally and fiercely. Eliza, with her quiet dedication and the bright trajectory of her senior years stretching out ahead of her. Jennifer, sharing that exact same transition into adulthood, demonstrating the kind of quiet responsibility that makes parents inherently proud. Sarah, caught in the vibrant, chaotic middle years of high school, looking up to her older sister while desperately forging her own unique path. And little Amy, a child with a lifetime of profound discoveries, inevitable mistakes, and beautiful triumphs stolen from her in a single instant. The brutal severing of these 4 young lives created an agonizing, expanding ripple effect that violently tore through their immediate families, their high schools, and the wider Austin community. The empty desks on Monday morning, the untouched bedrooms frozen in time, the sudden, deafening silence in homes that had once been filled with teenage laughter and minor arguments. These are the true, enduring artifacts of the crime, the permanent scars left behind on the geography of the city. The community of Austin had long considered itself a safe haven, a place where the dark, grittier realities of urban violence were held firmly at bay by a strong sense of community and a historically low crime rate. The yogurt shop murders shattered that collective, comforting illusion with violent finality. It forced parents to look at their own children with a sudden, suffocating terror, realizing in a heartbeat that the protective bubbles they had built around their families were incredibly fragile and easily punctured by evil. If 4 girls could be abducted, tortured, and murdered in the heart of a busy, well-lit suburban shopping center, simply for going to work or waiting for a ride home, then the very concept of safety was exposed as a devastating lie. The psychological landscape of the city was permanently altered that December night. Strict curfews were suddenly enforced, expensive security systems were installed in previously unlocked homes, and the carefree innocence that had once deeply defined a Friday night in Austin was completely replaced by a lingering, pervasive anxiety that hovered over the city for years. The setting of the crime, a place associated entirely with joy, youth, and suburban comfort, served to vastly amplify the horror, creating a jarring, sickening juxtaposition that continues to haunt the collective memory of the city to this very day. December in Central Texas is a season of subtle, quiet shifts. The oppressive, relentless heat of the long summer finally surrenders to cooler evenings, and the air takes on a crisp, electric quality. On the night of December 6, 1991, this seasonal shift provided a peaceful backdrop to a city moving through its familiar weekend routines. High school football stadiums, though perhaps finishing up their seasons, still echoed in the recent memory of the community, serving as massive gathering places that unified the sprawling, diverse neighborhoods. Malls were filled with the early murmurs of holiday shopping, and restaurants along West Anderson Lane buzzed with a loud, happy energy of families and friends breaking bread together. This was the macrocosm of Austin, a city deeply engaged in the joyful business of living, wholly oblivious to the microscopic point of absolute darkness that was rapidly forming within the walls of the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop. The 4 girls were a perfect microcosm of this vibrant city. They represented its future, its boundless potential, its inherent, undeniable goodness. The brutal fact that their lives were extinguished in such a callous, methodical manner is a permanent affront to the natural order of things. The vulnerability of their situation simply cannot be overstated. Retail workers, particularly young female teenagers working night shifts, occupy a uniquely exposed position in modern society. They are public-facing, implicitly required to interact with strangers, and often left to manage commercial spaces with minimal security and virtually no oversight. Eliza and Jennifer were holding the very thin line between the public sphere and the private sanctuary of the locked shop. They were the unofficial gatekeepers, relying entirely on the invisible social contract that dictates basic human decency and the rule of law. When that contract was violently and unexpectedly breached, they were left utterly defenseless against their attackers. The presence of Sarah and Amy only multiplied this terrifying vulnerability. They were not even employees trained to handle emergencies. They were guests seeking brief shelter and companionship in a place they implicitly trusted with their lives. The perpetrators who entered the shop that night did not just rob the store of its daily earnings. They robbed the victims of their agency, their dignity, and their fundamental human right to exist. They weaponized the girls' sheer innocence against them, turning their youth and physical disadvantages into tools for total control and subjugation. As we look back at the surviving portraits of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison, we are violently forced to confront the unbearable weight of what might have been. We see 4 young women permanently frozen in time, forever 13, 15, and 17 years old. We will never know what specific careers they might have passionately pursued, what loving families they might have built, what quiet, ordinary joys they would have experienced as they grew into adulthood. Their life narratives were brutally interrupted, replaced forever by a legacy of unspeakable trauma and an enduring, desperate quest for a justice that remains elusive. The setting of the yogurt shop, once a shining symbol of suburban normalcy and teenage independence, now stands as a grim, invisible monument to their memory, a stark reminder of the exact night when the darkest elements of the human soul broke through the fluorescent lights and changed the city of Austin forever. The juxtaposition of these deeply personal, innocent lives against the cold, calculated violence of their final moments remains the profound emotional core of this tragedy, echoing relentlessly through the decades. The hours approaching midnight on December 6th brought a chilling shift to the atmosphere inside the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop. The precise timeline of when the ordinary night fractured into unimaginable terror remains locked away in the ashes of the crime scene, but the fundamental reality of that transition is a harrowing testament to human vulnerability. Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were engaged in the final, mundane tasks of closing a retail establishment, a routine that dictates a lowering of defenses as the public sphere is shut away for the night. When the perpetrators breached the premises, they did not merely cross a physical threshold. They invaded a sanctuary of adolescent innocence with a sudden, overwhelming force that paralyzed the victims. The immediate psychological shock of the intrusion cannot be understated. For girls, expecting nothing more than the conclusion of a Friday night shift and a quiet ride home, were abruptly confronted by intruders whose presence immediately signaled a profound and inescapable threat. The transition from the quiet hum of refrigerators to a state of absolute, paralyzing fear must have been instantaneous. The intruders weaponized the isolation of the closing hour, exploiting the quiet suburban environment where the lack of passing foot traffic provided a devastating shield for their actions. The brightly lit interior of the shop, rather than serving as a beacon of safety, became a contained stage where the girls were entirely cut off from the outside world, trapped within the very space they had trusted to be secure. The girls were essentially isolated on an island of fluorescent light, completely overpowered by the sudden dominance of their attackers. This initial moment of subjugation set the devastating tone for everything that was to follow, stripping the victims of their autonomy before a single physical blow was ever struck. Once the physical space of the shop was entirely controlled by the attackers, the ordeal escalated into a methodical process of dehumanization and absolute subjugation. The physical overpowering of the 4 teenagers was not merely a means of securing compliance, it was a deliberate, horrific dismantling of their agency. The perpetrators forced the girls to strip, an act designed to humiliate and completely dismantle any psychological resistance. The attackers then utilized the girls' own clothing as bindings, twisting the very fabric of their everyday lives into instruments of captivity. To be bound by one's own garments is a deeply violating inversion of safety, transforming the mundane layers of personal protection into inescapable restraints. Helpless and completely immobilized, Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza were subjected to sexual assault. This ultimate violation of their physical autonomy was perpetrated in the cold environment of a commercial workspace, a stark juxtaposition that magnifies the absolute depravity of the act. The perpetrators exhibited a chilling level of organization and control, maintaining total dominance over 4 distinct individuals simultaneously, suggesting a terrifying coordination and a complete absence of human empathy. The girls were forced to endure this profound trauma within the confines of the shop, their inherent dignity brutally stripped away by individuals who viewed them entirely as objects for their own monstrous gratification. The psychological agony of those moments, the desperation and the overwhelming fear experienced by the victims, remains an unfathomable void that casts a permanent shadow over the legacy of the city. This systematic breaking down of 4 young lives was executed with a ruthless efficiency that indicates a terrifying level of comfort with extreme violence. The attackers transformed a brightly colored suburban dessert shop into a chamber of unimaginable torment, systematically erasing the identities and the inherent worth of the victims they had cornered. Following the brutal sexual violence and the complete subjugation of the victims, the narrative of the night descended into its most chilling and final phase. The perpetrators, having already inflicted unspeakable trauma, made the cold, calculated decision that there could be absolutely no witnesses left behind to recount the atrocities that had occurred. This decision marks a terrifying threshold, transitioning the crime from a horrific assault into a methodical mass execution. Bound, traumatized, and entirely defenseless, Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison were systematically murdered. The attackers utilized a firearm to administer the fatal blows, shooting each of the young girls directly in the head in a ruthless, execution-style manner. To look into the terrified faces of 4 young girls, the youngest being merely 13 years old, and make the conscious, deliberate choice to extinguish their lives requires a profound and chilling absence of humanity. The gunshots that echoed through the confined space of the yogurt shop were not just tools of murder. They were the absolute, violent erasure of 4 separate futures. The methodical nature of the executions suggests that the killers operated with a chilling sense of purpose, moving from one victim to the next to ensure complete and total silence. There was no hesitation, no sudden realization of the monstrous nature of their actions, only a grim, determined execution of a fatal plan. The stark reality that these vibrant, hopeful teenagers were grouped together and systematically eliminated in the back of a commercial store is an agonizing detail that permanently scars the historical record of the community. The immediate aftermath of the gunfire must have been a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind of absolute quiet that follows an irreversible act of profound destruction, leaving behind a devastating tableau of stolen youth. With the unspeakable core of the crime concluded, the perpetrators immediately shifted their focus towards self-preservation and the calculated destruction of evidence. The yogurt shop, now containing the tragic physical aftermath of their violence, had to be erased. In a desperate and deeply callous attempt to mask the true nature of the incident, the attackers deliberately introduced fire into the environment. They systematically ignited the commercial space, utilizing the destructive power of flames to consume the horrific reality they had just created. This act of arson was not an impulsive afterthought. It was a highly strategic maneuver designed to completely obliterate forensic clues, to destroy biological material, and to reduce the bodies of the victims to unrecognizable ash. As the fire began to spread, feeding on the combustible materials within the shop, the perpetrators slipped away into the cold December night, leaving the inferno to carry out their final, destructive command. The flames consumed the bright pastel interior, melting the plastic fixtures, shattering the remaining glass, and wrapping the bodies of the 4 young girls in a devastating shroud of intense heat. The use of fire as a tool for concealment adds a final layer of profound indignity to the victims, demonstrating the killer's complete disregard for the sanctity of human life even in the aftermath of death. The fire was intended to silence the crime scene permanently, to ensure that the physical space could never tell the true story of what Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza had been forced to endure. The perpetrators trusted that the chaos of a structural fire would effectively shield their identities and their unimaginable cruelty from the impending investigation, an assumption that heavily complicated the search for truth. The first indication that something was terribly wrong on West Anderson Lane came when emergency dispatchers received reports of a fire at the strip mall. When the Austin Fire Department arrived on the scene in the early morning hours, their operational mindset was entirely focused on standard fire suppression. They observed heavy smoke and active flames consuming the commercial space, presenting the immediate tactical challenge of containing a structural blaze before it could spread to adjacent businesses. The firefighters aggressively breached the burning building, battling their way through the thick, toxic smoke and the searing heat, completely unaware of the profound nightmare hidden within the flames. Their sole objective was to preserve property and extinguish the fire, operating under the standard assumption that the commercial building was empty after closing hours. It was only after the intense flames were finally knocked down and the suffocating smoke began to slowly clear from the charred interior that the devastating reality of the situation was finally revealed to the first responders. As they conducted their routine overhaul of the burned structure, their flashlights pierced the heavy, lingering darkness to illuminate a scene of absolute, incomprehensible horror. Amidst the blackened debris, the melted plastics, and the foul-smelling ash, they discovered the severely burned remains of 4 individuals. The immediate shock experienced by those seasoned firefighters is a profound testament to the sheer brutality of the crime. They had expected to find ruined equipment and structural damage, but instead, they were confronted with the charred bodies of 4 young girls. The realization that this was not a tragic accident, but a deliberate, staged inferno designed to cover up a mass murder, instantly transformed the scene from a routine fire suppression effort into one of the most complex and horrifying crime scenes in Texas history. The physical degradation of the victims by the fire made initial identification incredibly difficult, adding a deep layer of agonizing uncertainty for the families waiting desperately for their children. The fire had done its terrible work, leaving the arriving homicide detectives with a deeply fractured, heavily damaged puzzle, forcing them to begin their pursuit of justice in a landscape of literal and metaphorical ashes. The morning after the fire transformed West Anderson Lane into a surreal landscape of police tape, flashing emergency lights, and grieving investigators. The arrival of homicide detectives at the charred remains of the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop marked the beginning of an investigation that would quickly become a defining challenge for the Austin Police Department. Entering the building required navigating a toxic environment of structural instability, soot, and the lingering, heavy scent of burnt debris. The initial assessment of the crime scene revealed the devastating extent of the destruction caused by the fire. The intense heat had melted fixtures, warped metal shelving, and heavily compromised the physical evidence that investigators desperately needed to reconstruct the events of the previous night. The bodies of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison were recovered from the interior, their remains profoundly damaged by the flames. This thermal destruction posed an immediate and formidable barrier to forensic analysis, destroying delicate biological traces and complicating the collection of physical clues. The detectives realized with a sinking sense of dread that the perpetrators had achieved a terrifying degree of tactical success in their attempt to erase the crime scene. Every surface was coated in a thick layer of soot, and the air was thick with the remnants of industrial chemicals and charred material. Despite these overwhelming obstacles, the forensic team set to work with painstaking care, combing through the ash millimeter by millimeter, searching for any fragment of evidence that might have miraculously survived the inferno. As the news of the gruesome discovery broke across Austin, the community was plunged into a state of collective shock and profound grief. The local media descended upon the scene, broadcasting images of the burned storefront and relaying the heartbreaking confirmation that the victims were 4 young girls ranging from 13 to 17 years old. For the families of the victims, the early days of the investigation were an agonizing exercise in waiting and uncertainty, exacerbated by the need for formal forensic identifications due to the severe condition of the remains. The emotional weight of the tragedy rippled instantly through local high schools and neighborhoods, replacing the anticipation of the holiday season with a heavy, suffocating cloud of sorrow. Parents across the city began questioning the absolute safety of their routines, while public pressure mounted relentlessly on law enforcement to deliver swift answers. The Austin Police Department found themselves under an unprecedented microscope, facing intense scrutiny from the public, the media, and grieving families who demanded nothing less than the immediate apprehension of the monsters responsible. In response, a massive task force was assembled, bringing together local detectives, state investigators, and federal resources to pool intelligence and coordinate the sprawling manhunt. The directive was clear, but the path forward was shrouded in darkness, as the physical evidence salvaged from the scene yielded frustratingly few immediate answers. The initial wave of tips and witness reports flooded the department, creating a massive mountain of information that investigators had to sift through methodically, chasing down every rumor, potential sighting, and suspicious individual in the greater Austin area. Weeks stretched into months, and the initial flood of investigative leads began to slow down, leaving the detectives staring into a deepening void of silence. The physical evidence retrieved from a yogurt shop, heavily compromised by the fire, refused to easily yield a suspect. Fingerprints were largely destroyed or rendered unreadable, footwear impressions were distorted by the chaos of the fire suppression efforts, and the biological evidence available with the forensic technology of 1992 was severely limited. Detectives pursued countless theories, investigating local acquaintances, known offenders, and random transients who might have drifted through the commercial district that night. Every potential suspect was scrutinized, interrogated, and eventually cleared or sidelined due to a lack of definitive physical proof. The frustration within the police department grew palpable as the anniversary of the murders approached, transforming what everyone had hoped would be a quick resolution into a deeply entrenched cold case. The public vigils, which had initially drawn massive crowds of mourning citizens, slowly gave way to the quiet, agonizing endurance of families trapped in a state of suspended animation. The case files expanded exponentially, filling filing cabinets with thousands of pages of interview transcripts, polygraph results, and forensic reports, yet the core mystery remained entirely unsolved. The investigators were haunted by the cold, calculated precision of the crime, recognizing that whoever had committed these murders possessed a chilling level of discipline and self-control that allowed them to slip away into the night without leaving a trace that could withstand judicial scrutiny. As the years ground on, the relentless pressure to solve the Austin yogurt shop murders became an institutional obsession, casting a long shadow over the police department and the city's legal landscape. The investigation experienced a seismic shift as the 1990s drew to a close, driven by an urgent, desperate need for results that had simmered for nearly 8 years. In 1999, under the weight of immense public expectation and internal administrative changes, the focus of the investigation narrowed aggressively onto a specific group of young men. Authorities announced the startling arrest of 4 suspects who would forever be linked in the public consciousness as the Austin Four: Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. At the time the crimes were committed in 1990-1, these individuals had been teenagers themselves, ranging in age from 15 to 18. The arrests sent a shockwave through the community, offering a sudden, fragile glimmer of hope that the long nightmare of uncertainty was finally coming to an end. The revelation that the suspects had been peers of the victims during the era of the murders added a deeply disturbing layer to the narrative, forcing the public to confront the horrifying possibility that the perpetrators had been ordinary young people hiding in plain sight within the local community. The anticipation surrounding the impending legal proceedings was intense, as the families and the city prepared to finally confront the individuals accused of extinguishing the lives of Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza. The foundation of the prosecution's case against the Austin Four rested heavily on the extraction of confessions, a cornerstone of the investigation that would later become the central battleground of the entire legal saga. Investigators subjected the young suspects to grueling, extended interrogations that stretched across dozens of hours, pushing human endurance to its absolute limits under the suffocating weight of capital murder accusations. Through these intense sessions, authorities managed to secure detailed, recorded confessions from Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, in which they admitted to their direct involvement in the robbery, the horrific sexual assaults, and the final, execution-style murders of the 4 girls. For the police and the prosecution, these confessions were the smoking gun they had hunted for nearly a decade, providing a narrative framework that seemingly explained the unfathomable events of that December night. However, the legal road ahead was fraught with profound complexities and deep-seated controversies. As the cases prepared to move toward trial, defense attorneys immediately challenged the legitimacy and the voluntariness of the confessions, arguing that their young clients had been subjected to psychological coercion and prolonged sleep deprivation designed to break their wills. The community was starkly divided, caught between the agonizing desire for closure and the creeping, uneasy realization that the mechanisms used to secure these breakthroughs might not withstand the rigorous scrutiny of constitutional law. The stage was set for a tumultuous legal battle that would test the very limits of the justice system, exposing deep fractures in how the truth had been pursued and unearthing troubling questions that would take another decade to fully resolve. The unfolding of judicial proceedings for Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott took place amidst an atmosphere of immense civic tension, as the city of Austin and the relatives of the victims desperately sought finality after years of agonizing uncertainty. The Travis County courtrooms became the epicenter of a grueling legal confrontation where the prosecution case rested almost entirely upon the recorded confessions extracted during those exhaustive interrogation sessions. For the state, these statements served as the cornerstone of a narrative that, despite the catastrophic loss of physical artifacts destroyed by the Inferno, offered a comprehensive explanation of the tragic events. Prosecutors meticulously walked the jury through the sequence of occurrences, detailing how the young men allegedly breached the dessert shop, committed the robbery, and descended into the horrific violence of sexual assault and execution-style murder. The defense teams vigorously attacked the credibility and legality of those admissions, arguing passionately that they were the product of psychological exhaustion, coercion, and manipulation directed at vulnerable youths under immense public pressure. Despite these fierce objections, the emotional weight of the accusations and the profound horror of the crimes exerted a powerful influence on the courtroom proceedings. The final verdicts delivered by the judicial system were severe and uncompromising, marking a dramatic turning point in the long history of the case. Robert Springsteen was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death, the ultimate punishment prescribed by state law for such heinous acts, while Michael Scott was condemned to spend the remainder of his natural life behind bars. For a significant portion of the community and for the bereaved families, these sentences initially appeared to draw a definitive curtain over a painful chapter, offering a fragile illusion that justice had finally been achieved for Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison. However, the foundational pillars supporting these convictions were inherently unstable, constructed upon legal interpretations and procedural shortcuts that would soon fracture under the relentless scrutiny of higher appellate review. The edifice of certainty established at the turn of the millennium began to crumble steadily between 2006 and 2007, when appellate courts undertook a rigorous re-examination of the trial records. The highest criminal court of Texas, petitioned by dedicated defense counsel, scrutinized the methods and constitutional adherence governing the original convictions of Springsteen and Scott. The resulting judicial determination sent shockwaves through the legal community and devastated families who had believed the nightmare was permanently resolved. The court officially vacated the convictions of both men, ruling that fundamental constitutional protections had been gravely violated during their respective trials. Specifically, the judiciary identified a severe breach of the Confrontation Clause enshrined within the Sixth Amendment of the federal Constitution, noting that the prosecution had improperly utilized the confession of one defendant to incriminate the other without affording the defense the sacred right to cross-examine the accuser directly in open court. This procedural error was far from a minor technicality or an abstract legal nuance. It struck at the absolute integrity of the trial process itself, invalidating the mechanisms that had stripped two human beings of their liberty and, in Springsteen's case, threatened his very life. In an instant, the meticulously constructed framework of guilt dissolved, throwing the entire status of the prosecution back into complete disarray. The verdicts that had brought a temporary sense of solace were rendered legally void, forcing the state to confront the terrifying reality that the path to true resolution remained entirely uncharted and obscured by deep procedural flaws. While the legal battles raged within appellate chambers, scientific advancement was quietly moving forward, preparing the ground for a paradigm shift far more profound than any technicality of constitutional law. During the mid-2000s, revolutionary breakthroughs in forensic technology provided investigators with an unprecedented opportunity to reevaluate the severely compromised physical evidence recovered from the charred crime scene of 1991. Forensic scientists deployed advanced YSTR DNA profiling techniques, specialized methodologies designed specifically to isolate male genetic markers from minuscule or heavily degraded biological samples that conventional testing could never hope to resolve. These sophisticated procedures, unimaginable during the initial phases of the police investigation, were systematically applied to biological specimens carefully preserved from the body of the youngest victim, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. The collective anticipation surrounding these scientific analyses was palpable, as investigators and legal experts alike understood that these microscopic traces represented the ultimate objective truth, completely independent of human memory, coerced confessions, or courtroom rhetoric. When the laboratory work concluded, the results delivered a staggering revelation that completely shattered the theoretical foundation upon which the prosecution had built its case for nearly a decade. A complete and distinct male genetic profile was successfully isolated from the physical evidence retrieved from the victim, proving undeniably that an unknown male individual had been present during the most intimate and horrific moments of the crime. This discovery was not merely an ancillary clue. It was the unequivocal biological signature of a primary participant in the atrocities committed inside the yogurt shop, an individual whose existence had entirely escaped police detection throughout years of exhaustive searches and interrogations. The subsequent phase of this scientific inquiry required comparing this newly discovered, anonymous male genetic profile against the biological samples collected from the 4 young men who had been prosecuted and imprisoned as the Austin Four. The comparative results dealt a catastrophic blow to the remaining credibility of the state's narrative. The genetic signature belonging to the unknown male did not match Robert Springsteen. It did not match Michael Scott. Furthermore, it showed no concordance with Maurice Pierce or Forrest Wellborn. None of the individuals whom the justice system had targeted, prosecuted, and condemned carried this specific biological marker within their genetic makeup. This definitive scientific exclusion meant that the foreign DNA found directly on the body of the murdered child belonged to someone entirely outside the circle of the accused. To compound this extraordinary revelation, when the unknown profile was entered into the national database known as CODIS, the system returned no matches whatsoever, indicating that the genetic signature belonged to a complete phantom, a man whose DNA had never been cataloged in state or federal criminal registries. This irrefutable scientific reality completely dismantled the state's theory of guilt, demonstrating conclusively that the true perpetrator remained unidentified and completely at large, while the justice system had tragically imprisoned individuals for crimes the scientific evidence proved they did not commit. Confronted with this overwhelming body of exculpatory evidence and the legal impossibility of sustaining prosecutions built upon discredited confessions and contradicted by modern science, prosecutors found themselves in an inescapable corner. By 2009, having exhausted every legal avenue to preserve the original narrative, authorities officially moved to dismiss all remaining charges against Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. They were subsequently released from custody, stepping back into a world they had left behind as teenagers, carrying the profound emotional scars of prolonged imprisonment for capital crimes they did not commit. The conclusion of this chapter offered no genuine sense of triumph or closure, because the chilling reality of an unknown, active murderer roaming free continued to hang heavily over the city of Austin. The tragic collateral damage of the flawed investigation extended further when Maurice Pierce, whose life had been permanently fractured by the cloud of suspicion and arrest, met a violent end during an unrelated confrontation with law enforcement in 2010. The judicial system had expended millions of dollars, consumed decades of human effort, and devastated multiple lives, only to find itself standing squarely back at the starting line. The yogurt shop murders remained an open wound, and the anonymous DNA profile stood as the sole, silent witness to a horrific night that refused to surrender its ultimate secret to the passage of time. As investigators looked toward the future, burdened by the heavy weight of past mistakes, they realized that the pursuit of genuine justice required an entirely new paradigm, one where absolute fidelity to empirical fact superseded all institutional pressure for rapid resolution. The lingering shadows of 1991 stretched forward, reminding everyone involved that untangling the truth demanded relentless patience, unyielding scientific rigor, and an unwavering commitment to rectifying historical failures. Ultimately, the turbulent legal battleground of the trials and appellate reversals exposed the profound vulnerabilities inherent within the justice system when truth is overshadowed by the intense demand for swift retribution. The persistent shadow cast by that tragic December night in 1991 continues to blanket the collective conscience of Austin, permanently altering the underlying fabric of this Texas community. More than 3 decades have slipped away since destructive flames ravaged the small dessert establishment on West Anderson Lane, yet the relentless march of time has failed to dissolve the deep psychological scars or diminish the profound mystery surrounding the atrocities committed there. For the families of the 4 victims, the arduous quest for genuine justice has evolved into an interminable emotional marathon, punctuated by heartbreaking false starts, monumental judicial miscalculations, and a suffocating vigil that refuses to find peace. The enduring memory of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison remains vividly alive, preserved not merely within the shattered hearts of their grieving relatives, but etched permanently into the historical consciousness of a municipality that lost its pristine innocence alongside the vibrant futures of 4 young girls. Each passing calendar year serves as a bitter reminder of the unresolved nature of the case, keeping agonizingly open a wound that neither judicial rulings nor investigative reversals have managed to heal. The profound tragedy of the yogurt shop murders transcends the conventional boundaries of a routine criminal file, solidifying its place as one of the most glaring institutional failures and haunting enigmas in modern American legal history. It stands forever as a solemn testament to the harrowing vulnerability of youth confronted by senseless violence and the immense, grueling struggle required to rectify catastrophic miscarriages of justice, establishing an indelible benchmark for how a community confronts dark hours. The profound societal ripples generated by this unprecedented catastrophe fundamentally reshaped local perceptions of personal safety, introducing an era of permanent vigilance that permanently displaced the carefree naivety of earlier decades. Residents of Austin were forced to accept the harsh, unsettling reality that absolute malice can manifest without warning within the most ordinary, familiar corners of daily suburban life. This sobering awakening triggered a comprehensive reassessment of adolescent protection standards, transforming parental behavior and elevating baseline caution into an inescapable rule of modern existence. Yet, beyond these behavioral adaptations, the heaviest burden carried by the community has been the paralyzing weight of doubt and institutional uncertainty. The unsettling revelation that individuals were wrongfully convicted, enduring years of imprisonment before the prosecution theory completely collapsed, laid bare the terrifying vulnerabilities of a legal system driven by public pressure to deliver rapid retribution at any cost. This compounding tragedy, encompassing both the innocent lives extinguished in energy and potential and the young men unjustly ensnared by a malfunctioning judicial apparatus, highlights the staggering complexity inherent in recovering truth once primary physical evidence has been consumed by fire and initial chaos. The collective trauma inflicted upon the region proved durable, leaving behind an invisible yet palpable barrier that altered how neighbors interacted with one another and how the municipality viewed its own internal security for generations to follow, altering the civic psychology of Central Texas. Today, the official dossier remains classified within the permanent category of unresolved investigations, functioning as an active cold case that continuously haunts local law enforcement offices and commands the ongoing attention of specialized homicide detectives. The singular golden thread connecting the present era to that fateful December evening is the anonymous male genetic profile, painstakingly isolated from the remains of the youngest victim through the revolutionary evolution of forensic science. This microscopic biological sample represents simultaneously the ultimate beacon of hope and the impenetrable silence of a perpetrator who managed to vanish into the winter darkness without leaving behind any conventional identifying markers. Investigators no longer rely passively on chance occurrences or standard comparisons within restricted national databases that previously yielded zero results. Instead, they actively embrace cutting-edge scientific methodologies, including advanced phenotyping and collaborative genetic genealogy, pioneering strategies that bridge the yawning chasm between historical investigative failures and modern analytical breakthroughs. These sophisticated techniques allow specialists to map distant ancestral lineages and cross-reference anonymous genetic signatures against vast public genealogical networks, pursuing faint familial connections that might eventually lead straight to the doorstep of the elusive killer. This scientific persistence ensures that the passage of time does not automatically translate into total impunity, offering a resilient counterweight to the permanent erasure of memory and ensuring accountability endures. The methodical pursuit driven by these technological advancements is inextricably linked to an uncompromising ethical commitment to truth, objectivity, and accountability. Current investigators approach the cold case with a deep sense of historical humility, fully aware of the grave missteps that compromised previous decades of inquiry. Every genealogical lead is scrutinized under a microscope of rigorous verification, cross-referencing historical civil registries, marriage certificates, and geographical migration patterns to eliminate false leads with absolute precision. This meticulous approach contrasts sharply with the frantic, pressure-laden atmosphere that characterized the late 90s, emphasizing that empirical certainty must always supersede institutional impatience. The integration of genetic genealogy into the investigative workflow requires seamless collaboration between molecular biologists, specialized genealogists, and seasoned homicide detectives, creating a multidisciplinary task force designed to outsmart the decades of silence. While this deliberate pace may occasionally frustrate observers craving immediate answers, it represents the only responsible path toward achieving a legally unassailable resolution that can withstand the most aggressive courtroom challenges. The preservation of the biological evidence over 30 years of administrative transition stands as a logistical triumph, ensuring that the silent witness recovered from the crime scene remains intact and ready to speak its ultimate truth when the right familial branch is finally uncovered through genealogical mapping. Reflecting upon the broader cultural footprint of the yogurt shop murders necessitates a serious examination of how society narrates violence, tragedy, and the pursuit of justice. Authors, documentary creators, and investigative chroniclers bear a profound ethical obligation when revisiting such deeply painful chapters, requiring absolute fidelity to factual reality and a total rejection of sensationalism or exploitative storytelling. The fundamental purpose of keeping this history alive is never to gratify morbid curiosity, but rather to honor the victims by restoring their complete human dignity, rescuing them from the cold anonymity of police files and newspaper headlines. Every contextual analysis, psychological insight, and chronological detail must serve as a respectful tribute to 4 young women whose bright futures were violently stolen away. This disciplined narrative approach ensures that true crime journalism retains its highest civic utility, acting as an honest mirror reflecting the ongoing imperfections of legal and social institutions. By examining past errors with unsparing candor, society equips itself to better protect the vulnerable, challenge systemic flaws, and demand uncompromising integrity from those entrusted with enforcing the law. The enduring resonance of the Austin tragedy proves that true storytelling must always balance sorrow with purpose, transforming historical trauma into a lasting catalyst for positive institutional evolution across modern society. At the absolute center of this sprawling narrative stand the families of the victims, whose extraordinary grace, resilience, and quiet dignity have sustained the flickering light of hope through decades of unimaginable darkness. The parents, siblings, and loved ones of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison and Sarah Harbison navigated an agonizing landscape of false promises, judicial setbacks, and agonizing delays without ever succumbing to bitter cynicism or surrendering their demand for authentic accountability. Their unwavering resolve provided a steadfast moral compass for a community frequently lost in the labyrinth of legal complexities and scientific debates. They never sought vengeance for its own sake, but rather demanded the simple, non-negotiable restoration of truth, ensuring that the memories of their children remained vibrant, respected, and untainted by institutional failure. The sheer emotional endurance displayed by these families commands profound admiration, serving as the true emotional anchor of the entire historical record. Their steadfast refusal to let the tragedy fade into comfortable oblivion reminds everyone that behind every statistical data point and forensic term lies a deeply cherished human life, an irreplaceable soul whose absence continues to reverberate profoundly through the hearts of those left behind, demanding eternal remembrance. As the ongoing investigation pushes forward into an uncertain yet hopeful future, the ultimate resolution of the Austin Yogurt Shop murders remains an imperative goal for all who value truth and equity. The combination of advanced genetic genealogy, unyielding investigative dedication, and the eternal vigilance of a community that refuses to forget creates a powerful framework for eventual success. The anonymous DNA profile waits patiently within its secure enclosure, a silent sentinel bridging the chasm between past horrors and impending accountability. While no scientific breakthrough or judicial verdict can ever undo the catastrophic damage inflicted on that December night, the final unmasking of the perpetrator will represent a vital milestone in restoring cosmic balance to a deeply wounded city. The names of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah will forever remain etched into the foundational stone of Austin's history, serving as an eternal reminder of innocence lost, resilience proven, and the unbreakable human commitment to seeing justice ultimately prevail over the darkest shadows of the past. Beyond the strictly technical parameters and legal vicissitudes that characterized the decades following the grim discovery of December 1991, the tragedy of the Austin Dessert Shop continues to resonate as an unhealed wound embedded deeply within the collective conscience of American society. This harrowing event transcends the typical status of a dormant cold case filed away in dusty state archives. It represents a profound, paradigm-shifting case study exposing the inherent boundaries, systemic vulnerabilities, and eventual redemption pathways of a justice system forced to confront its own historic failures. The meteoric rise of modern forensic science, particularly the groundbreaking evolution of investigative genetic genealogy, offers an unprecedented lens through which previously silent biological traces are transformed into prospective heralds of truth. Yet, this sophisticated technology is no miraculous panacea capable of instantly erasing decades of institutional ambiguity. Rather, it demands painstaking methodological rigor, unwavering patience, and flawless multidisciplinary collaboration between experienced investigators and molecular biology specialists. Utilizing expansive public genetic databases where everyday citizens voluntarily upload profiles to map complex ancestral lineages has opened uncharted pathways, instilling renewed optimism where despair had long taken root. Situated at this complex intersection between contemporary scientific innovation and historical preservation lies the potential final chapter of this epic narrative, a conclusion whose eventual realization depends entirely upon the relentless tenacity of those who refuse to abandon the pursuit of equity and truth for Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah. The transition toward this advanced era of scientific investigation simultaneously compels a profound institutional introspection regarding how major criminal inquiries were conducted historically and the absolute imperative of preserving evidentiary integrity from the earliest moments of a crime scene response. The egregious missteps committed during the nascent stages of the Austin investigation, heavily exacerbated by overwhelming media pressure, public panic, and coercive interrogation tactics that yielded wrongful convictions, now serve as an essential cautionary textbook example in modern criminology curricula. These tragic institutional miscarriages underscore a harsh, immutable reality. The institutional drive to secure swift convictions must never supersede the methodical, impartial search for objective truth, lest innocent lives be shattered while actual perpetrators remain cloaked in obscurity. The eventual exoneration and release of Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, forced by undeniable DNA evidence and the judicial recognition of fatal constitutional violations, represented a moment of sobering intellectual clarity for Texas jurisprudence, vividly illustrating how severely a legal apparatus can malfunction when fueled by expedience over fundamental fairness. This burdensome legacy of past errors casts a long shadow over every current detective who inherits the files, instilling a necessary culture of methodological skepticism and intellectual caution designed to prevent the recurrence of historical injustices across modern judicial systems. For the grieving families of the 4 young victims, the protracted wait for definitive resolution has transmuted over the years into a remarkable exhibition of psychological endurance, maintaining extraordinary resilience against the corrosive passage of time and the prolonged absence of tangible answers. Parents, siblings, and extended relatives have learned to coexist with the profound, fathomless void left by such violent disruptions, while simultaneously safeguarding the vibrant memories of young lives cut tragically short. Their voices, consistently driven by an unwavering demand for authentic accountability, yet entirely devoid of bitter malice, continuously remind society that behind sterile police logs, forensic reports, and genetic markers lie deeply cherished human beings whose individual destinies were stolen by unimaginable cowardice. This deeply human dimension protects the ongoing investigation from fading into obscurity, elevating each anniversary of the tragedy beyond a routine moment of communal mourning into a solemn mandate urging authorities to sustain active inquiries. The quiet dignity displayed by these families across decades of uncertainty constitutes one of the most poignant aspects of the entire saga, embodying the moral fortitude required to navigate immense darkness, without ever surrendering hope that objective truth will ultimately emerge from the shadows. The broader cultural impact of this historic tragedy extends far beyond local municipal boundaries, cementing its status in contemporary criminological history as a transformative milestone regarding the perceived vulnerability of neighborhood commercial spaces and isolated young service workers. Across the nation, security protocols governing evening retail operations underwent rigorous reassessment, prompting corporations to adopt stricter protective measures, advanced surveillance technologies, and enhanced situational awareness training for vulnerable staff members. The shattering reality of the yogurt shop massacre effectively dissolved the comfortable illusion that suburban communities possessed inherent immunity against extreme violence, forcing a collective awakening regarding the fragility of social safeguards protecting everyday life. Young employees staffing retail counters were no longer viewed as anonymous background figures, but rather as valued community members whose physical safety constitutes a shared societal responsibility. This cultural evolution, though born from unimaginable agony, successfully reshaped preventive practices and heightened safety awareness for subsequent generations navigating late-night employment environments in metropolitan and suburban regions alike. As successive years continue to unfold, the temporal distance fundamentally alters the character of the investigation, shifting the dossier from contemporary legal breaking news into an enduring mission of historical truth preservation. Modern investigators, although separated temporally from the physical reality of 1991, possess technological and analytical arsenals that their predecessors could only imagine. Genetic genealogy specifically redraws the boundaries of feasibility, permitting identification scenarios previously relegated to science fiction. Each preserved biological sample and meticulously extracted genetic profile functions as a sophisticated navigational thread, offering a tangible mechanism to traverse decades of obscurity and locate the true offender. Nevertheless, domain experts continuously emphasize that this methodology requires exhaustive, painstaking labor, demanding meticulous verification of genealogical trees, vital records, historical marriages, and geographic migrations to eliminate misleading leads with absolute precision. This intellectual discipline resists the instant gratification craved by the general public, yet remains the sole credible pathway toward a legally bulletproof resolution that can withstand rigorous courtroom challenges. The enduring mystery of the Austin yogurt shop murders persists as a striking testament to the profound complexities of human nature, oscillating perpetually between the absolute darkness of the initial crimes and the persistent illumination of human determination seeking vindication. Fundamental questions continue to haunt criminal justice scholars. How such a meticulously planned, devastating act of violence could be executed without leaving immediate identifying clues, and how a judicial apparatus could err so profoundly as to condemn innocent youths while missing the biological signature left directly at the scene. These inquiries nourish an indispensable ethical standard for anyone studying or recounting this history, affirming that true justice is never instantaneous, but rather an arduous, demanding process requiring uncompromising commitment to factual accuracy, constitutional protections, and profound empathy toward victims and their grieving relatives. Within the hushed environments of specialized molecular laboratories where high-powered computers compare genetic sequences, inside quiet detective offices poring over yellowed case files, and throughout the collective memory of a community that refuses surrender, the essence of the investigation remains fiercely active. The young women whose futures were stolen continue to inhabit the municipal memory space, commanding deep respect and demanding ultimate closure. The implicit promise formulated in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy remains completely unaltered. As long as viable investigative leads exist, innovative scientific techniques emerge, or dedicated professionals remain committed to eradicating impunity, the case file will never truly close. The chronicle of that December night refuses its final period, suspended within the twilight of elapsed decades while awaiting the inevitable dawn of absolute truth. This persistent pursuit embodies the ultimate guiding compass for any civilized society confronting historical trauma, ensuring that unwavering dedication to equity ultimately triumphs over the longest shadows of human error and calculated concealment. The broader historical significance of this prolonged quest highlights the profound ethical responsibilities incumbent upon storytellers, journalists, and chroniclers who choose to transmit these narratives across generations. Examining this complex tragedy requires rigorous adherence to verifiable facts, completely discarding sensationalized exploitation or morbid dramatization to safeguard the absolute dignity of the victims and honor the enduring sorrow of their relatives. Every structural element, psychological evaluation, and contextual framework must function as a solemn tribute, rescuing the young women from cold administrative anonymity. Through disciplined, compassionate narrative craftsmanship, true crime documentation achieves its highest moral utility, serving as an honest mirror reflecting institutional imperfections while inspiring continued vigilance, administrative reform, and unyielding dedication to ethical governance across modern legal systems worldwide. Ultimately, the persistent memory of this dark chapter serves as an enduring reminder that the pursuit of true justice demands infinite patience, meticulous scientific precision, and unwavering moral courage. The journey toward absolute resolution continues unabated across the passing decades, guided by the steadfast hope that truth will ultimately prevail over darkness and bring lasting peace to all deeply and permanently affected souls forever. The intersection of molecular science and historical investigation represents a profound paradigm shift in how cold cases of unprecedented complexity are approached in the contemporary era. As researchers and specialized detectives delve deeper into the microscopic remnants preserved from that devastating night in 1991, the boundaries of what is achievable through forensic technology continue to expand exponentially. The anonymous male DNA profile, secured through meticulous preservation protocols, serves as the ultimate anchor for all current investigative efforts, guiding specialists through a labyrinth of genetic data that spans generations and geographical borders. This molecular fingerprinting bypasses the limitations of human memory and flawed testimonies, offering an objective, immutable baseline that cannot be compromised by coercion, fading recollection, or institutional pressure. The painstaking work conducted within advanced genetic laboratories and genealogy offices reflects a quiet revolution, where patience and precision supersede the hasty conclusions that plagued earlier decades of the inquiry. Every database query and familial connection explored brings investigators one step closer to unmasking the phantom whose actions shattered 4 young lives and left an entire community reeling in collective grief. This technological renaissance ensures that the passage of time, rather than eroding the possibility of justice, actually enhances the tools available to uncover the truth, transforming what was once considered an insurmountable impasse into an active, dynamic pursuit of accountability. The implementation of collaborative genetic genealogy within this framework requires an extraordinary level of intellectual discipline and methodical verification. Analysts cannot rely on automated matches alone. Every ancestral link, historical marriage certificate, and migration pattern must be meticulously corroborated to prevent errors that could jeopardize a future prosecution. This rigorous standard of proof is the direct legacy of the painful miscarriages of justice that occurred when the original investigative team yielded to public panic and institutional impatience. Today's investigators operate under a profound awareness of history, recognizing that a bulletproof case must be constructed with absolute factual integrity to withstand the intense scrutiny of a modern courtroom. The multidisciplinary collaboration uniting molecular biologists, professional genealogists, and seasoned homicide detectives creates a robust operational matrix capable of navigating decades of administrative silence and obfuscation. By mapping distant cousin matches and systematically building outward toward immediate family branches, specialists are charting a course through uncharted waters, steadily narrowing the geographic and genealogical window around the unidentified suspect. This deliberate, unhurried pace can sometimes test the patience of an anxious public yearning for immediate closure, yet it remains the only ethically responsible path toward achieving a genuine, legally unassailable resolution that honors the sanctity of the judicial process. While the technological and legal dimensions of the ongoing investigation absorb the attention of experts, the emotional heartbeat of the entire narrative remains firmly anchored in the unyielding resilience of the victims' families. The parents, siblings, and loved ones of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison have demonstrated a quiet, monumental courage that defies the staggering weight of the grief they have endured for over 30 years. Their steadfast refusal to let the memory of the 4 young women fade into administrative obscurity has provided a vital moral compass for the city of Austin and for the broader community of individuals committed to truth and equity. They have navigated an agonizing landscape of false promises, devastating judicial setbacks, and prolonged silences without ever surrendering their demand for authentic accountability or succumbing to cynical despair. Their voices, characterized by a profound dignity and an absence of bitter rancor, remind society that behind every forensic term, DNA profile, and statistical data point lie irreplaceable human beings whose bright futures were violently stolen by unimaginable cruelty. This deeply personal human dimension shields the investigation from becoming a sterile academic exercise, ensuring that the relentless pursuit of the killer remains a sacred duty owed not just to the rule of law, but to the eternal memory of the innocent souls who lost their lives in the winter darkness. The cultural and societal fallout of the yogurt shop murders continues to resonate deeply within the collective conscience of modern commerce and community safety. The tragic events of that December night fundamentally shattered the comforting illusion that suburban tranquility provided an absolute shield against extreme violence, forcing a permanent evolution in how businesses protect vulnerable young workers. Corporations, local shop owners, and municipal authorities instituted rigorous security protocols, advanced surveillance technologies, and enhanced situational awareness training designed to safeguard late-night retail employees from potential threats. This proactive awakening, born from profound tragedy, transformed safety standards across the retail sector and heightened public awareness regarding the inherent risks faced by adolescents working in isolated environments. The 4 young victims thus assumed a tragic yet enduring role as the catalysts for systemic change, ensuring that their sacrifice contributed directly to the protection of subsequent generations of workers. This legacy of institutional adaptation and heightened vigilance serves as a constant reminder that community safety is not a passive given, but an active, ongoing responsibility requiring constant attention, structural improvement, and unwavering solidarity among all members of society. As investigators navigate the complexities of the present era, they carry the immense psychological burden of the case's historical failures while maintaining an unwavering focus on future breakthroughs. The institutional memory within the police department has evolved significantly, incorporating the hard-earned lessons of past wrongful convictions and procedural missteps into a modern investigative philosophy centered on empirical objectivity. Detectives approach every incoming lead, genealogical suggestion, and physical artifact with a healthy skepticism and a commitment to exhaustive corroboration, ensuring that no stone is left unturned and no assumption goes unchallenged. This internal transformation reflects a broader maturation within criminal justice institutions, where the humility to acknowledge past errors paves the way for more reliable, scientifically grounded methodologies. The ongoing pursuit of the yogurt shop perpetrator is thus not merely an isolated cold case investigation, but a defining test of institutional redemption and professional excellence, proving that a dedicated system can correct its course and honor its fundamental commitment to uncovering the absolute truth, regardless of how many years have elapsed since the crime was committed. The role of true crime documentation and public storytelling in keeping this historic case alive carries profound ethical responsibilities that demand absolute dedication to truth and respect. Chroniclers, journalists, and media creators who examine the complexities of the Austin tragedy must consciously reject sensationalism, exploitative dramatization, and morbid curiosity in favor of rigorous, factual accuracy and empathetic human portrayal. Every detailed account, analytical essay, and documentary presentation functions as a vital tribute to the victims, rescuing them from the cold anonymity of police logs and newspaper headlines. By maintaining this high standard of narrative integrity, storytellers ensure that the public understanding of the case remains grounded in reality, highlighting the systemic vulnerabilities and human costs associated with the tragedy while supporting the ongoing efforts of investigators. This disciplined approach transforms true crime storytelling from passive entertainment into a meaningful instrument of historical preservation and civic reflection, reminding audiences of the enduring importance of justice, empathy, and institutional accountability in an increasingly complex world. The geographic landscape of Austin has undergone a staggering transformation over the decades since 1991, expanding from a bustling regional hub into a sprawling, dynamic metropolitan center, yet the physical site of the former yogurt shop remains an indelible psychological landmark. The physical structures may change, and new generations of residents may inhabit the neighborhoods surrounding West Anderson Lane, but the memory of that fateful night persists as a quiet, haunting undercurrent within the city's identity. This duality, a rapidly modernizing metropolis overlaying a deeply historic, unresolved trauma, creates a unique emotional environment where the past and present constantly converse. The community's refusal to forget the young victims demonstrates a rare collective loyalty, proving that true urban growth must encompass both economic prosperity and the preservation of historical consciousness. As the city looks toward an uncertain future, the unresolved quest for the yogurt shop killer serves as a solemn reminder that no community can achieve complete wholeness until its deepest wounds are healed through the ultimate delivery of objective truth and institutional justice. The global scientific community continues to push the boundaries of DNA technology, introducing novel analytical capabilities that enhance the potential for resolving even the most degraded biological samples. Innovations in low-template DNA extraction, next-generation sequencing, and advanced computational algorithms offer renewed optimism to cold case investigators worldwide, demonstrating that science possesses an ever-expanding capacity to resurrect silent evidence. Within this rapidly advancing technological landscape, the genetic profile recovered from the Austin crime scene benefits directly from ongoing refinements as specialists apply newly developed tools to extract additional clarity from the original biological material. This constant technological evolution ensures that the investigation never stagnates, maintaining a proactive posture that anticipates future breakthroughs rather than waiting passively for answers to emerge. The synergy between brilliant molecular scientists and dedicated cold case detectives represents the vanguard of modern criminal justice, proving that human ingenuity, backed by cutting-edge science, is an unstoppable force capable of breaching the most stubborn barriers of time and secrecy. The psychological resilience exhibited by the families of the victims throughout decades of exhaustive legal battles and agonizing wait stands as an enduring testament to the indomitable human spirit. Their ability to endure unimaginable heartbreak while continuing to advocate peacefully and persistently for justice has earned them the profound respect of the entire nation. They have transformed their private sorrow into a public beacon of hope, ensuring that the stories of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah remain vibrant symbols of innocence and grace. This quiet strength has sustained the momentum of the investigation through its darkest hours, providing the emotional fuel necessary for investigators to press forward when obstacles seemed insurmountable. The ultimate resolution of this case, when it arrives, will belong first and foremost to these families, whose unwavering love and steadfast commitment have kept the flame of truth burning brightly across more than 30 years of profound darkness and relentless uncertainty. As this 8th segment of our exhaustive narrative concludes, the trajectory of the investigation points steadily toward an inevitable, long-awaited reckoning with the past. The combination of advanced genetic genealogy, unyielding investigative dedication, and the eternal vigilance of a community that refuses to forget creates an unbreakable framework for eventual success. The anonymous DNA profile rests securely within its specialized archive, a silent sentinel bridging the chasm between historical horror and impending accountability. While no judicial verdict or scientific breakthrough can ever undo the catastrophic damage inflicted on that December night, the final unmasking of the perpetrator will mark a monumental milestone in restoring balance to a deeply wounded city. The names of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah will forever remain etched into the foundational consciousness of Austin, serving as an eternal reminder of innocence lost, resilience proven, and the unbreakable human commitment to ensuring that truth ultimately triumphs over the longest shadows of time. The continuous exploration of scientific avenues through the lens of collaborative genetic genealogy opens fascinating and unprecedented perspectives in the handling of the most complex unsolved cases in modern criminal history. As the years accumulate and transform current judicial events into historical memory, modern biotechnology demonstrates a remarkable capacity to make biological evidence speak when it had remained silent during decades of institutional deadlock. Experts in molecular genetics, combining their efforts with specialized investigators, manage today to bypass apparent obstacles by extracting precious information from minuscule cellular fragments. This innovative methodology relies on a meticulous mapping of familial ancestries, allowing an anonymous DNA profile to be linked to distant kinship circles without requiring a pre-existing direct match in traditional institutional databases. It is a work of infinite patience that demands absolute intellectual rigor, with every genealogical hypothesis needing to be verified and cross-referenced with ancient civil registries to rule out any false leads and target the individual sought by justice with surgical precision. The implications of this revolutionary approach extend far beyond the technical framework, redefining the boundaries of investigation and offering a tangible glimmer of hope where discouragement and skepticism had finally taken deep root over successive disillusionments. Furthermore, this dynamic shifts the burden of proof back towards scientific infallibility, offering a powerful counterbalance to human error and flawed testimonies. This technological revolution is necessarily accompanied by a profound ethical reflection on privacy protection, the consented use of personal data, and the legal limits of collaborative genealogical investigation. Judicial authorities and specialized laboratories navigate a constantly shifting regulatory terrain where every scientific advancement must be rigorously validated by courts to guarantee the future admissibility of evidence before an impartial jury. Procedural rigor has become the indispensable shield to avoid the tragic errors of the past, ensuring that the enthusiasm generated by these new discoveries never outweighs the absolute respect for fundamental rights and constitutional guarantees. The bitter lessons learned from the false convictions of the 90s profoundly transformed the culture of prosecutors' offices and police departments, instituting a constructive skepticism and an irreproducible empirical corroboration requirement. From now on, every genetic lead explored is subject to meticulous scrutiny, crossing biological data with tangible material elements to build a solid case capable of withstanding the most fierce defense challenges during a potential trial. This requirement for formal perfection guarantees that the quest for truth never comes at the expense of fairness and procedural justice, maintaining the sacred trust between the legal system and the society it serves, while cementing an institutional accountability that prevents history from repeating itself in tragic ways. Beyond laboratories and courtrooms, the city of Austin continues to carry the invisible yet persistent weight of this tragedy that redefined its collective identity on the threshold of the 90s. New generations of residents discover the story of the yogurt shop murders not as an event of their immediate daily routine, but as a dark and striking pan of local history, transmitted through memorial narrative, archival articles, and the constant vigilance of media platforms. This intergenerational transmission plays a crucial role in preventing oblivion from tarnishing the memory of the victims and in maintaining a benevolent yet firm citizen pressure toward the institutions responsible for upholding the law. The city has grown, modernized, and multiplied its infrastructures, but this urban scar remains anchored in popular consciousness as a solemn reminder of the fragility of human security facing the unpredictable surge of destructive violence. The maintenance of this collective memory is the expression of a categorical refusal to accept impunity, transforming the memory of the tragedy into a durable civic commitment favoring truth and the protection of the most vulnerable within the community. It stands as an ongoing testament to the resilience of a population that refuses to let its darkest hour define its future, choosing instead to channel its enduring sorrow into a vigilant guardianship over justice. The temporal challenge represents the most formidable obstacle for contemporary investigators who resume the examination of this file after more than 30 years of waiting and uncertainty. The aging or disappearance of key witnesses, the potential degradation of certain subsidiary material elements, and the evolution of environmental conditions of the initial scene demand high-level analytical expertise to reconstitute the exact chronology of facts. Every testimony gathered in the past must be reevaluated with a critical eye, taking into account potential biases related to interrogation techniques of the era and the overwhelming media pressure that weighed on early investigators. The meticulous preservation of biological seals remains the most salvager element, because only the DNA molecule preserved with care offers a guarantee of objectivity totally emancipated from human memory fluctuations and narrative contradictions. Prosecutors and current detectives thus approach this file with remarkable methodological humility, conscious that time plays both against the persistence of memories and for the constant improvement of scientific tools capable of piercing the mystery. This delicate balance between the degradation of physical surroundings and the exponential growth of analytical prowess defines the reality of modern cold case investigation. The unknown male DNA profile, preserved with jealous care at the heart of federal seals, embodies by itself the quintessence of mystery and the ultimate hope of resolution for this complex affair. It stands as the sole incorruptible witness of what truly occurred in the backroom of West Anderson Lane, ignoring the passage of years and defying the false certainties that led justice astray in the past. This biological clue is not merely a sequence of molecular codes. It symbolizes the indelible trace left by the author of the crimes, the physical footprint of an individual who believed he could vanish permanently into the obscurity of that December night. Modern science, by giving it a voice through phenotyping and genealogical research techniques, transforms this prolonged silence into a permanent threat to the anonymity of the culprit. Experts tirelessly pursue the decryption of this organic signature, convinced that every rapprochement, every explored genealogical tree, and every examined geographical coincidence brings the community a little closer to the moment when the identity of this phantom will finally be revealed to the light of day. It is an unyielding technological pursuit that bridges the gap between historical tragedy and final accountability. In this prolonged quest for truth, The dignity and unshakable resilience of the victims' families remain the purest and most inspiring moral compass of this entire long judicial chronicle. Parents, brothers, sisters, and loved ones of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison have demonstrated superhuman courage in traversing decades of trials, false hopes, legal disappointments, and frustrating institutional silences without ever losing their demand for justice. Their struggle has never been motivated by sterile vengeance, but by a fundamental need for recognition, respect, and truth to honor the memory of these 4 young girls whose lives were so unjustly cut short in mid-flight. Their voices, marked by profound wisdom and discreet pain, constantly remind society that behind the technical complexity of DNA analysis and the aridity of legal procedures lie irreplaceable human beings whose shattered destinies command eternal respect and the unwavering commitment of all who believe in the sacred value of human life. Their enduring presence anchors the entire investigative journey in profound emotional truth, preventing the narrative from drifting into sterile academic abstraction. The cultural and preventive repercussion of this historical drama has also profoundly transformed professional safety norms applicable to neighborhood businesses and isolated young workers across the entire nation. Employers, legislators, and protection associations have fully grasped the particular vulnerability of adolescents occupying service jobs at staggered hours, prompting a generalization of vigilance protocols and sophisticated surveillance equipment. The collective awareness sparked by the yogurt shop murders put an end to the illusion of absolute suburban security, forcing communities to adopt a proactive approach facing potential criminality and reinforcing solidarity links within neighborhoods. The 4 young girls thus became, despite themselves, the tragic symbols of an imperative necessity for protection and prevention, guaranteeing that bitter lessons drawn from their tragic disappearance continue to save other lives and guide the continuous improvement of public safety conditions in modern commercial spaces. This enduring safety legacy ensures that their untimely sacrifices continue to protect countless individuals navigating the vulnerabilities of late-night retail environments across the country. As this long and meticulous exploration of the meanders of one of the most troubling and complex files of contemporary criminal history draws toward its current stage, the yogurt shop case of Austin remains suspended in vigilant and resolute anticipation. The mystery persists, wrapped in the shadow of past decades, but human will to re-establish justice and make factual truth triumph remains an indestructible force, supported by the constant progress of science and the tireless commitment of those who refuse to abandon the victim's memory. Light will eventually dispel the mists of secret, guided by the absolute certainty that no monstrous crime could remain eternally protected by oblivion, and that justice, however late and difficult to conquer it may be, remains the ultimate and necessary accomplishment of any civilized society facing the darkest trials of its history. This chronicle thus concludes this specific phase on a note of unalterable hope, recalling that as long as there are men and women to seek the truth, the memory of innocence will never extinguish, standing firm against the longest shadows of time. The relentless dedication required to navigate the labyrinthine complexities of a multi-decade cold case demands an extraordinary synthesis of professional tenacity, technological mastery, and profound emotional fortitude. As investigators traverse the vast temporal expanse separating the chilling realities of that December night in 1991 from the sophisticated analytical landscape of the present day, they carry the immense weight of historical expectation and institutional responsibility. The journey is not merely an exercise in archival retrieval or forensic processing. It represents a solemn moral crusade to restore balance to a community whose foundational sense of security was irrevocably fractured more than 30 years ago. Every single file review, every re-examined piece of physical evidence, and every newly unlocked genealogical connection serves as a vital stepping stone across the turbulent waters of doubt and bureaucratic inertia. Modern detectives approach these historical records with an enlightened perspective, fully cognizant of the catastrophic pitfalls that ensnared their predecessors, ensuring that the pursuit of truth remains untainted by the corrupting influences of public panic, media frenzy, or administrative pressure for rapid retribution. This intellectual maturation within investigative agencies establishes a formidable safeguard against history repeating itself, transforming the painful lessons of past wrongful convictions into an enduring masterclass in objective inquiry, rigorous cross-validation, and unwavering respect for constitutional guarantees that protect every citizen across the legal spectrum. The profound paradigm shift that has redefined modern criminal investigation is nowhere more evident than in the seamless integration of advanced molecular biology and collaborative genealogical research. Where traditional investigative frameworks once hit impenetrable walls due to the degradation of physical items or the exhaustion of restricted law enforcement databases, contemporary science has carved revolutionary pathways through the very heart of anonymity. The anonymous male DNA profile, carefully extracted from the remains of the youngest victim and preserved with meticulous dedication across decades of administrative evolution, stands as the central pivot of this technological renaissance. By deploying sophisticated phenotyping techniques and casting wide, methodical nets across public genetic repositories, specialists are able to chart complex familial lineages that bridge generational divides and geographical borders. This intricate mapping process requires an immense investment of intellectual capital, as every potential ancestral link and historical kinship connection must be subjected to uncompromising empirical verification against civil registries, marriage records, and migration patterns. The sheer meticulousness of this undertaking guarantees that false leads are systematically eliminated before they can compromise the integrity of the investigation, reflecting a profound commitment to absolute evidentiary precision. It is an arduous, unhurried endeavor that defies the instant gratification demanded by modern media culture, yet it remains the sole credible mechanism capable of breaching the ironclad wall of secrecy behind which the true perpetrator has attempted to conceal his identity for over 3 decades without detection or apprehension. Amidst the intricate mechanics of forensic science and legal procedure, the true emotional heartbeat of this enduring narrative remains anchored in the unshakable dignity and remarkable resilience displayed by the families of the victims. The parents, siblings, and extended relatives of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison have traversed an agonizing landscape defined by false promises, devastating judicial setbacks, and profound institutional silences, without ever surrendering their demand for authentic accountability. Their steadfast refusal to let the memory of the 4 young women fade into administrative obscurity has provided a steadfast moral compass for the city of Austin and for the broader community of individuals committed to equity and truth. They have navigated their profound grief with a quiet, monumental grace that completely eschews bitter rancor or calls for sterile vengeance, focusing instead on the simple, non-negotiable restoration of justice and the preservation of human dignity. Their voices continually remind society that behind every forensic term, statistical data point, and molecular sequence lie irreplaceable human beings whose vibrant futures and unwritten dreams were violently extinguished in the winter darkness. This deeply personal human dimension protects the investigation from devolving into a sterile academic exercise, ensuring that the pursuit of the killer remains a sacred obligation owed not just to the rule of law, but to the eternal memory of the innocent souls whose lives were so unjustly stolen by unfathomable malice and cowardice. The cultural and societal fallout of the yogurt shop murders continues to resonate deeply within the collective conscience of modern commerce and community safety, permanently altering how society perceives vulnerability in everyday environments. The tragic events of that fateful night shattered the comforting illusion that suburban tranquility provided an absolute sanctuary against extreme violence, forcing a permanent evolution in corporate responsibility and workplace protection standards. Businesses, local shop owners, and municipal authorities instituted rigorous security protocols, advanced surveillance technologies, and enhanced situational awareness training designed to safeguard late-night retail employees from potential threats. This proactive awakening, born from profound tragedy, transformed safety standards across the retail sector and heightened public awareness regarding the inherent risks faced by adolescents working in isolated environments. The 4 young victims thus assumed a tragic yet enduring role as the catalysts for systemic change, ensuring that their sacrifice contributed directly to the protection of subsequent generations of workers navigating evening shifts in diverse commercial settings. This legacy of institutional adaptation and heightened vigilance serves as a constant reminder that community safety is not a passive given, but an active, ongoing responsibility requiring constant attention, structural improvement, and unwavering solidarity among all members of society. The physical landscape of Austin has undergone a staggering transformation over the decades since 1991, expanding from a bustling regional hub into a sprawling, dynamic metropolitan center, yet the symbolic resonance of the former dessert shop remains an indelible psychological landmark. The physical structures may change, and new generations of residents may inhabit the neighborhoods surrounding West Anderson Lane, but the memory of that fateful night persists as a quiet, haunting undercurrent within the city's collective identity. This duality, a rapidly modernizing metropolis overlaying a deeply historic, unresolved trauma, creates a unique emotional environment where the past and present constantly converse across generational divides. The community's refusal to forget the young victims demonstrates a rare collective loyalty, proving that true urban growth must encompass both economic prosperity and the preservation of historical consciousness. As the city looks toward an uncertain future, the unresolved quest for the killer serves as a solemn reminder that no community can achieve complete wholeness until its deepest wounds are healed through the ultimate delivery of objective truth and institutional justice. The global scientific community continues to push the boundaries of DNA technology, introducing novel analytical capabilities that enhance the potential for resolving even the most degraded biological samples. Innovations in low-template DNA extraction, next-generation sequencing, and advanced computational algorithms offer renewed optimism to cold case investigators worldwide, demonstrating that science possesses an ever-expanding capacity to resurrect silent evidence. Within this rapidly advancing technological landscape, the genetic profile recovered from the Austin crime scene benefits directly from ongoing refinements, as specialists apply newly developed tools to extract additional clarity from the original biological material. This constant technological evolution ensures that the investigation never stagnates, maintaining a proactive posture that anticipates future breakthroughs rather than waiting passively for answers to emerge from the shadows. The synergy between brilliant molecular scientists and dedicated cold case detectives represents the vanguard of modern criminal justice, proving that human ingenuity, backed by cutting-edge science, is an unstoppable force capable of breaching the most stubborn barriers of time and secrecy. The psychological resilience exhibited by the families of the victims throughout decades of exhaustive legal battles and agonizing wait stands as an enduring testament to the indomitable human spirit. Their ability to endure unimaginable heartbreak while continuing to advocate peacefully and persistently for justice has earned them the profound respect of the entire nation. They have transformed their private sorrow into a public beacon of hope, ensuring that the stories of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah remain vibrant symbols of innocence and grace. This quiet strength has sustained the momentum of the investigation through its darkest hours, providing the emotional fuel necessary for investigators to press forward when obstacles seemed insurmountable. The ultimate resolution of this case, when it arrives, will belong first and foremost to these families, whose unwavering love and steadfast commitment have kept the flame of truth burning brightly across more than 30 years of profound darkness and relentless uncertainty. As this tense segment of our exhaustive narrative concludes, the trajectory of the investigation points steadily toward an inevitable, long-awaited reckoning with the past. The combination of advanced genetic genealogy, unyielding investigative dedication, and the eternal vigilance of a community that refuses to forget creates an unbreakable framework for eventual success. The anonymous DNA profile rests securely within its specialized archive, a silent sentinel bridging the chasm between historical horror and impending accountability. While no judicial verdict or scientific breakthrough can ever undo the catastrophic damage inflicted on that December night, the final unmasking of the perpetrator will mark a monumental milestone in restoring balance to a deeply wounded city. The names of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer and Sarah will forever remain etched into the foundational consciousness of Austin, serving as an eternal reminder of innocence lost, resilience proven, and the unbreakable human commitment to ensuring that truth ultimately triumphs over the longest shadows of time. The temporal horizon of this exhaustive investigation, stretching across more than 3 decades of institutional perseverance and emotional endurance, continually redefines how modern society confronts the most profound and harrowing mysteries of its criminal past. Every passing year moves the physical reality of that grim December night further into historical memory, yet paradoxically brings the scientific community and dedicated investigators closer to a resolution once thought permanently out of reach. The remarkable advancements in collaborative genetic genealogy, coupled with the uncompromising rigor of contemporary forensic protocols, act as a powerful photographic developer, exposing microscopic details that remained obscure during decades of administrative deadlock and investigative frustration. The anonymous male DNA profile, carefully safeguarded within federal archives, continues to serve as an unyielding sentinel, a silent and incorruptible guardian that defies impunity and rejects the premature erasure of memory. This permanence of biological evidence forms the central pivot upon which all hopes for ultimate justice depend, transforming passive waiting into an active, dynamic pursuit of cross-disciplinary truth. Experts labor tirelessly to decode signals buried deep within global databases, cross-referencing minute traces with mathematical precision to eliminate ambiguity and close the net around an elusive perpetrator. It is through this delicate alchemy of cutting-edge technology and unshakable human resolve that the implicit promise of final accountability remains alive, offering the assurance that the painful chapter of the Austin Yogurt Shop murders will eventually reach its rightful conclusion and restore profound meaning to the tireless efforts of all who refuse to surrender to despair. The profound transformation of investigative methodologies, catalyzed by revolutionary breakthroughs in molecular biology, demonstrates how science can ultimately redeem cases once abandoned as hopeless losses. Specialized analysts no longer rely solely on conventional databases that hit structural dead ends at the turn of the millennium, but instead navigate expansive public genetic networks with meticulous surgical precision. This monumental task requires cross-verifying thousands of civil registries, historical marriage records, and geographical migration patterns, resembling a high-precision textual and biological archaeological excavation. Every formulated hypothesis must withstand the unforgiving test of factual contradiction to prevent repeating the tragic missteps of the past, specifically those hasty convictions driven by coerced confessions that severely undermine the integrity of the Texas judicial system. Methodological prudence has thus become the absolute golden rule of contemporary investigative practice, ensuring that the quest for truth never compromises procedural fairness or constitutional guarantees. Prosecutors and detectives today carry a profound sense of historical responsibility, recognizing that every strategic decision must be legally bulletproof to withstand the most aggressive courtroom challenges. This insistence on formal perfection provides the ultimate safeguard against arbitrary judgments, elevating criminal investigation into an endeavor of the highest ethical nobility and ensuring that institutional memory serves as an effective shield against historical repetition. Beyond technical complexities and procedural nuances, the true essence of this tragic chronicle remains firmly anchored in the human dimension, honoring the 4 young lives whose futures were violently extinguished in that frozen backroom. Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison possessed unique voices, distinct aspirations, and loving families whose existence was shattered by senseless brutality. The immense void left in their respective homes remains an undeniable, poignant reality that time has never softened, turning daily grief into an ongoing fight for dignity and official recognition of the truth. The extraordinary moral strength displayed by their relatives across decades of waiting, disappointment, and false hope forms the purest ethical compass of the entire narrative, serving as a constant reminder that true justice must honor innocent victims above all else. Their youthful faces, frozen in eternal grace, continue to inhabit the collective imagination of a community that refuses to forget, embodying the absolute moral imperative of a society that protects its most vulnerable members. This unwavering human presence prevents the investigation from deteriorating into a sterile academic exercise, ensuring that the pursuit of the killer remains a sacred obligation owed to the memory of those who perished in the winter darkness. The cultural and societal fallout of the historical tragedy reshaped collective consciousness throughout Texas and far beyond, radically altering the perceived safety of suburban commercial spaces. The reassuring belief that small neighborhood businesses and evening retail establishments offered natural sanctuary against violent crime was shattered beyond repair on that fateful winter night. Businesses employing young workers on staggered shifts were forced to overhaul security protocols, introducing enhanced surveillance systems, rigorous vigilance training, and robust protective measures to safeguard personnel from emerging threats. This collective awakening, born from unimaginable sorrow, fostered a proactive safety culture that continues to protect countless lives across the nation today. The young victims thus became inadvertent symbols of heightened accountability and public protection, ensuring their tragic disappearance contributed directly to safer working environments for subsequent generations. This enduring security legacy reminds all communities that peace is never guaranteed, but rather demands constant vigilance, structural improvement, and steadfast solidarity among all citizens. Time functions as both an eroding agent of superficial memories and an essential amplifier of historical necessity, reinforcing the duty to preserve accurate accounts for future generations. Chroniclers, investigative journalists, and narrators bear a profound ethical obligation when recounting such complex events, requiring absolute fidelity to verified facts and a total rejection of sensationalized exploitation. Every documented detail, analytical reflection, and psychological nuance must serve as a respectful tribute to those denied their future, rescuing them from cold administrative anonymity. Through disciplined, compassionate storytelling, true crime documentation achieves its highest civic utility, reflecting institutional imperfections while inspiring ongoing reform and unyielding dedication to ethical governance. This deliberate transmission of history acts as a vital civic resistance against oblivion, ensuring that the voices of the victims continue resonating across time barriers and reminding society of the delicate balance connecting security, liberty, and justice. As biotechnological innovations continue advancing within quiet laboratory spaces, the hope for ultimate resolution remains anchored in the silent promise that science will eventually triumph over darkness. Modern investigators, bearing the heavy lessons of past judicial failures, approach their mission with renewed humility and unwavering determination, knowing that every genealogical cross-reference and archive check brings them closer to factual truth. The unknown individual whose DNA haunts federal archives can no longer hope to evade the combined vigilance of modern science and human perseverance indefinitely, as the net tightens under the weight of irrefutable evidence. This scientific certainty infuses new energy into the teams dedicated to achieving historical closure, transforming patient waiting into an active, resolute commitment toward bringing the perpetrator into the light of accountability. Within the quiet homes of Austin, and throughout the collective memory of a city that never abandoned its foundational loss, the names of Amy, Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah resonate as a permanent call for justice, integrity, and empathy. Their invisible presence accompanies every effort to decode the mysteries of that dark night, infusing technical investigations with profound emotional and moral weight. The promise formulated in the aftermath of the tragedy remains completely unaltered. As long as viable leads exist, methods improve, or dedicated professionals refuse impunity, the case remains active. The story of the yogurt shop murders exists in the present perpetual, defying temporal barriers with the stubborn certainty that light will eventually dispel the shadows, proving that justice, however late, remains the ultimate necessity of a civilized society. As this final stage of our exhaustive narrative draws to its conclusion, the Austin yogurt shop case stands as an indelible monument to judicial complexity, human grief, and collective resilience. The profound lessons learned from decades of struggle, scientific evolution, and institutional reform now guide modern criminal investigations toward unprecedented standards of empirical rigor and constitutional respect. Although the final judicial resolution is still unfolding, the trajectory is firmly established, propelled by an unshakable commitment to uncovering objective truth. While biotechnology refines its revelations and the community maintains its vigilant dedication, the luminous presence of the 4 young victims watches over the city, testifying that the pursuit of justice, regardless of how arduous or prolonged, remains the most noble endeavor humanity can undertake to honor its lost children and heal the deep wounds of history. The enduring legacy of this profound judicial odyssey extends far beyond the confines of individual courtrooms or forensic laboratories, establishing an enduring benchmark for how a modern nation addresses its deepest historical traumas. It demonstrates unequivocally that institutional accountability, scientific dedication, and empathetic remembrance are not mutually exclusive principles, but rather interdependent pillars supporting the architecture of a truly equitable society. As investigators press forward into the coming years with steadfast purpose, the community of Austin and the broader world remain united in the quiet conviction that truth possesses an inherent resilience capable of piercing even the darkest veils of concealment. The ultimate revelation of the perpetrator's identity will not only provide long-awaited closure to the families who have suffered beyond measure, but will also reaffirm the timeless truth that human dignity, justice, and memory ultimately prevail over the longest shadows of time, ensuring that the enduring light of truth shines forever across future generations as an eternal testament to human resilience.